got the TikToks. We got the YouTubies. We got the things. We got the biff. We got the ba. We got the bigger. We got the jigger. We got the big play. Oh. Ugh. How you guys all doing today? I had an absolutely wonderful weekend. I tell you what, I worked. I worked, but I got to play the first show that I have done in years since COVID. Since COVID, I was able to play my guitar for once in front of a crowd, and it was very emotional. Emotional would be the word that I would use. Evening to you, Anemone. Conrad, good to see you, bud. That guy, good to see you guys. I'm having just an extra ligand disease. Good to see you, bud. So happy May Day. Happy May Day to you, Anemone. And so I've got one day more of work. I'm working tomorrow at the Capitalist job, and then my mom is going to be in town. My mom is going to be in town, and then I'm going to hang out with my mom. It's going to be so nice to see my mom. Haven't seen her since before COVID. It's absolutely wonderful. Things that remind us that it's and Anemone, I'm really starting to worry that it's on your end. Like, my mic is where it is. It's exactly in the right spot. I think it might be your end. Like, unless other people start talking about it. Yeah. Seeing my mom is going to be really good. It just is like, really reminds me, like, our life is not about going to a shitty job that you barely tolerate and do a thing for people who hate you and who barely tolerate their job. Right? Like, we're here to enjoy each other and to have family and to discuss things, to live, to learn, to find out more and more. Kevin, good to see you, bud. Cotton, always a pleasure. And it just seems to me like we are on this ridiculous path, this ridiculous and absurd path, where we're doing everything possible to consolidate more and more power into the hands of a small, rapacious group of elite psychopaths. And we've got somebody in the chat on TikTok. Capitalism is the only way. Yet the only people that we should cede power to are the people causing the problem. That's right, bud. That's right. It's definitely the thing to do, right? It's like saying we should give all the authority to the guy who keeps beating everybody up. That's great. It's like simping on the highest possible level. It's just like the most ridiculous position to take. Yeah, there is no logical or moral arguments for capitalism. Yeah, capitalism is going to, like, capitalism goes one way or the other. The discussion that we are having is not whether or not capitalism destroys itself. The discussion we are having is whether or not it's going to take us with it. That's the discussion. Like, anybody with a rational brain or is capable of seeing like 1 + 1 = 2 can understand that capitalism is destroying itself. The question is whether or not it's going to destroy us. That's the question. And I posit that perhaps we should make decisions to destroy the system to save ourselves before it manages to destroy itself and us with it. That's the entire argument, right? And I am more or less of the opinion that the system burns down anyway. That the structures and the buildings and the society that perpetuates it all burns down anyway. It's whether or not we want to go with it or not. And I would argue that not immolating all of humanity and not immolating our societies is probably the right thing to do. It seems as though the defenders of capitalism have utterly buried their heads in the sand and are just living in a total dream world. Like, what we are looking at this stage in the game, and I think it is completely fair to say it, is a group of people who have adopted a type of flat earth mindset that does not care about evidence or facts, does not care about reality, doesn't care to look for reality or facts or evidence. That literally they are fine with what is happening. They're fine with the destruction of the civil society. They're fine with the poisoning of the air and the water. They're fine with all of that, and are constantly trying to find reasons to defend it. Reasons to defend it. Yeah, here's a cool way to do capitalism. Abolish all rents. Everything should be bare minimum. Only ever... yeah, everything should be bare minimum, only ever for sale. Yeah. Like, I'm of the opinion that we should literally set a wealth cap at $1 million. Like, just tell people there's no such thing as infinite growth on a planet with limited resources. And it's absurd. I think one of the most absurd statements and one of the absurd belief systems that persist is that we should have a system of government that diffuses power, but it's completely cool that one person has $100 billion. Like, that's normal, right? He earned it, right? Like, it's these sorts of childish absurdisms that can barely be taken care of, right? Like, that can barely be believed. I love this, right? So then what happens when you set that wealth cap and then the wealthy move to America? Bye. Like, this is what's so absurd about the conversation, bud. Money isn't real. Money's not real. And the wealthy are parasites. Worthless, pathetic parasites. Essentially what you are arguing is that, oh no, they'll sell their assets, the things that actually matter, their businesses, the things that actually matter, and leave. Which, by the way, is my goal. That's what I support. I support the wealthy going around, right? Going away. So nobody is happy until everyone is broke. If you think $1 million is broke, bud, I don't know what to tell you. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, I just feel like we're not, like, the defenders of capitalism, I don't think are capable of having a credible or interesting discussion about this anymore. These are the sorts of statements that come out of the capitalist class. $1 million is broke. Like, okay, bud. Like, bye. Enjoy your flat earth. Right? But then they're taking their wealth and taking it away from Canada. They're not taking the land. They're not taking the businesses. They're not taking the assets. They're not taking the buildings. They're not taking all of that. What are they taking? The money. Who cares? Let them. Let them take the money. Like, you guys are worshiping money. It's amazing to watch that your position literally is we should trade breathable air, drinkable water, workable land, infrastructure, the future of our children, the education of our children, the healthcare of our society for little pieces of paper that we print on a screen. Like, that's your position. That's your position. So what if they do? Who cares? Let them. See, you guys are worshiping money. It's unbelievable to watch. Like, it's unbelievable. Like, you think that money matters more than clean air. Like, that's incredible. That's an incredible position. Mesh, don't think I've ever seen you here before, bud. Good to see you. Mocked. Hey, Mocked. Been a long time since I've seen you, I feel. Good to see you. Yeah, exactly. Wait. Was capitalism not function when we only ever had thousandaires and millionaires? Was it failing then? I mean, it's always been failing, right? Capitalism is a system of slavery. It requires the exploitation of an underclass in all cases. It's just whether or not it's using whips or not. And there's more slaves now than there ever has been, because capitalism is functioning exactly as it's intended to do, right? Which is by enslaving the populace and driving wealth into the hands of a small group. And we've got people here who are literally worshiping money. Like, we live off money. No, we don't. We live off food. We live off land. We live off air. All of these things are withheld and hoarded by a capitalist class who then use money as the tool to force you to work for them. That's the argument and that's the position, right? If Walmart Vosh, I gotta tell you, dude, bringing up Vosh is the worst possible thing you could do. But Vosh is an FBI snitch, right? Like, just absolutely gross, frankly. Like, you know, a pro-imperialist, weird, creepy pedophile, right? I don't think I'll be getting into the COVID conversation with people who are defending capitalism. Honestly, I need competence in that conversation, so we're not going to have that. Yeah, exactly. Like a disease. Yeah, we never had real civilization before capitalism, right? So one of the things that has kind of come across my eye, this is a Globe and Mail article, and I wanted to go through this article today, like just as a treat for myself and as a treat for you guys. A big reason why I want to go through this article is because I think that what we're doing in regards to how we're discussing China is essentially embarking on a path of total mass hysteria. That we are living in a place of utter hysteria, like just crazed, manic lunacy that's based on premises that are ridiculous from the outset. Like that if China talks to someone, it's bad because China is bad. Like the beginning point of the conversation is that China is a threat that we should be afraid of. And so I want to go through this article to really show you how hysterical and how based on hysteria the conversation has become. But it's hardly surprising when you're dealing with capitalists who are not capable of having a rational discussion even about the system they defend. So, this is China views Canada as a high priority for interference, CSIS report. Start with the obvious, right? CSIS is CIA Junior, right? So, as trustworthy as the CIA is, which is not even at all, right? Not even a little bit. Bunny, I guess that's your name. Whatever this is, Bunny. I accept your apology. The China sees Canada as a high priority target and employs incentives and punishment as part of a vast influence of networks directed at legislators, business executives, and diaspora communities in this country, according to a top secret intelligence assessment from the Canada Security Intelligence Services. Not very top secret, right? Not really. I love it. According to a top secret intelligence assessment, not really top secret. We're talking about it, right? You can look at it. It's super top secret, though, guys. Anyone can look at it. Super top secret. Essentially, China sees Canada as a high priority target, right? Or crazy idea, China wants to talk to us, right? Like here's a way of saying it that doesn't make you sound like a psychopath. China sees Canada as a country worth talking to, and employs the methods of communication as part of a vast influence network directed at people who live in the country. So like already off the bat, I'm like looking at this article just being like, all you got to do is say spooky words, right? All you got to do is be like, China sees Canada as high priority target. Like literally, China wants to talk to Canada. That's it. What party should you vote for in Ontario? At this point, I think the Green Party probably is the only party worth a damn. And the reason why I say that is that when Mark Schreier shows up, he shows up to things. That's the difference. Like the NDP will basically like come out for a minute, snap some pictures and leave. But the Green Party guy will actually come and hold signs and actually talk. So I respect him, and I think that what he's trying to do is probably what's best. So I think that you should probably be supporting the Green Party in Ontario at this stage, because they're like the Liberal Party's a joke and the NDP are pathetic. Like just ridiculous. The report. Oh no, the CSIS report is an overview of a Chinese government foreign interference in Canada, ranging from investigating a conservative MP's relatives in China to harassing a mainland Chinese student in Canada who publicly supports Hong Kong's democracy movement. So, like, literally the conservative MP's relatives in China argument is straight up just like the Chinese government asking questions to their own citizens, and then this paper saying that's harassment. A mainland Chinese student in Canada who publicly supported Hong Kong's democracy movement. It's literally supporting color revolutions in China. So yeah, probably China should be looking at people who are attempting to like foment color revolution within their country, right? One would think that that's a rational position to take. That if your position is we should foment a color revolution and Yeah, yeah. China is breathing our air. This is an act of aggression. These are the sorts of hysterical comments that we're getting in this world that we live in. Easy Sploit says in Colombia, the children of a school were forced to carry the flag of the Soviet Union. What's my opinion of this? So what? Children in Canada are forced to carry the Canadian flag. American schools force children to carry American flag. Who cares? Like, it's such a non-starter. Like, all you got to do before you even ask these sorts of questions is really think, like, if it was Canada and they were holding a Canadian flag, would you be scared of it at all? Like, who cares? So, and what were the circumstances? Like, were they at an event called Flags of the World? Like, I don't know anything about it. And honestly, if it was that the school was forcing kids to carry the flag of the Soviet Union in support of the Soviet Union, absolutely based. I'm glad that they did that. The report warned that Beijing is the foremost perpetrator of foreign influence in Canada. Of course, Beijing is the foremost perpetrator of foreign interference in Canada, because they're the largest economy in the world, and they want to talk to us. Like, this is what's so embarrassing about all of this. Like, do we think China should not be talking? Do we think that China should not be trying to be like, hey guys, we're China. We're trying to, make sure that we all live peacefully. The whole of this article is just terrified that China is talking, and is talking to people, is talking to the government, and is talking to business people, and is talking to investigators, and is talking to former Chinese citizens. And we're all going there saying, the Chinese are a threat, they're talking to us. Oh! Buddy is asking, what's nationalism anyway? Oh, Bud. Okay, you're at like the very beginnings of all of this. Fantastic. Nationalism is the idea that my nation is the best. That Canada, let's use, I'm from Canada, that I'm a Canadian, we should be doing what's right for Canadians, and Canada is the Canadian connection, and Canada is the greatest Canada of Canada. Of course, this attitude means that if I'm the greatest, then you're not. And if you're doing something that I don't like, I have the right to stop you because my nation is great and your nation is bad. And oftentimes nationalism comes with a great deal of racism. That's why you hear things like white nationalists. So white people will begin saying white people are the best in the greatest nation in the world, right? We're the greatest race and the greatest nation in the world. And it's kind of small-minded. It's understandable why it erects, why it shows up. Like, people want what's right for their own world. Do you want to have to think you're the best to be the nationalist, or just have your nation's interests first? Well, that's kind of the same, honestly. Like, what's really the difference between and this is why I think nationalism, like John Mearsheimer makes the argument that nationalism is unavoidable, that it's literally a nation saying out loud and that we should look out for our own nation's interests. And there is fundamentally nothing wrong with that, because we're all of the nation that we are a part of. And it's an outcropping, though, of it does reveal, though, fundamentally the weakness of the nation-state system. We tend to believe that the nation-state system is like the great system, that of course this is the natural order of things, that we should have nations and nation-states, right? And but the nation-state system itself was created by European powers, right? That we have divided ourselves amongst imaginary lines, and oftentimes these imaginary lines are used against the people who live in the societies, right? Like, and nationalists often will lever these divisions that exist within societies and say that it's happening for the good of the nation or for the good of the people, right? Yeah, average redditor. Okay. There's a reason I don't really talk to TikTok, man. It's tough to talk to TikTok. Like, just like brain dead take after brain dead take after brain dead take. It's just very difficult. if you do want to have an adult conversation, right? There's the YouTube link. I feel like I'm gonna send people over to YouTube just because like going through the garbage is really tough. Ligon to see, yeah, I was forced to venerate your troops in elementary school every November 11th, despite you committing war crimes and atrocities in Asia. Yeah, John, good to see you. Could the right wing ever become environmentally conscious, or is that against the law of nature? I mean, you would think that the right would care about the environment, right? You'd think that they would. Like that's what's so funny about the right wing is that they're all talking about how they need to conserve and conservation and all of this. And there was a period of time, like the Red Tories in Canada, were environmentally conscious. I just think that we've been taken over by hysteria, this money worship, right? So the worship of money matters more than breathable air and clean water. That money is what matters the most. And we've seen that even in the chat today. Literally people saying like, but we need money. It's like not really. Like not really. Like we don't need money. Like if somebody said, I'll give you all of the money that exists in the world, but the air is poisonous and you can't breathe it. Like, you would never take that deal unless you were a psychopath or just a ridiculous person. Like, you want breathable air. But this is fundamentally the deal that we're making, right? We're making the deal that, oh, you have the possibility to get rich, i.e. get a lot of paper money that we print on screens that doesn't really matter, but we'll poison the air for it. Like we're revealing ourselves to be a very dim-witted, small-minded people who refuse. And at this point, it's just got to be called a refusal. We just refuse to understand that money doesn't matter, especially when compared to like clean water. When compared to clean food. Like the money is so beyond irrelevant. And the reason why we are put into this money worshipping hysteria is because it benefits the people who have withheld the assets from us, who have claimed ownership of the land and the water. It's a tool of control. And if you spend your entire life just manically pursuing the pursuit of money and sacrificing everything else at that altar, then that's exactly what you'll do. And that's more or less what the right wing is all about now, right? That you can see that with the Ford administration. Just straight up fuck the environment, fuck the healthcare system, fuck any of that. Like what matters is money for me. That's it. And so if this is your attitude, then don't be too surprised whenever everything burns down around you. Mock says, nationalism of an oppressed people does not equal nationalism of a not oppressed people. Yeah. And I mean, nationalism is also tricky because you start to, like, it's usually the nationalists that are willing to purge the society of unclean what they would call unclean elements, right? It's usually, like, there's a very like purity doctrine that comes with nationalism, that no, we're not going to take care of these poor, vulnerable people. We'll purge them instead for the greater strength of our society. That kind of talk. Yeah, Cotton says, I'd argue there are nationalisms that are at least justified. Anti-colonial nationalism against imperialism is useful. Yeah, fascinating that this Globe article isn't paywalled. Yeah, hey, fancy that. Fancy that. Anti-Chinese propaganda not being paywalled so anyone can see it. Interesting. Transylvanian, good to see you. The nation state is an invention of the 17th and 18th centuries. In the bigger picture of human history, it's really not been around for that long. Yeah, there's no reason why it should stay around forever. But I mean, fundamentally what nationalism is the idea that, like, me and my neighborhood should be well taken care of. Like, that's the fundamental backbone of all of it. That my street should be clean, not have homeless people on it. Everyone should be doing well. Like that's the fundamental which is why it'll never go away. And if the nation state idea and the national borders were to suddenly dissolve, well, that idea wouldn't dissolve with it. The idea that the people around me in my community should be doing well. And I think that's just like an extremely basic, normal human position to take. That when I walk out into my street and I look around, everything's fine. And the trouble, of course, with nationalists and the nationalism idea is that it comes out of a limited scope by definition, right? That if all you're doing is stepping onto your street, looking around and saying everything's fine, so if you're not having a good time, it's because there's something wrong with you. And so it's because of this limited scope, this like intentional limited scope. It's by definition limited in its scope. That when it gets presented with larger problems that require real analysis, well, then some of the solutions it comes up with are crazy, like really, really fucking crazy. No, I don't see us abolishing the nation state within our generation or the generation after that. No, if anything, I think that the borders will just become more solidified. That the borders that may be challenged are the larger federal borders, but that's like a collapsing empire sort of position. I don't even know if I should continue reading this article. We've like gone off the rails completely. I just to me, this is the heart of it, of course. It warns that absent real disincentives, such as a foreign influence registry and indictments of foreign interference actors, Chinese targeting of Canada is expected to continue and increase over time. So that's really what this article is trying to achieve. It's trying to increase support so that we can write people up, right? Blacklist them. Do some McCarthy-style shit, right? That what we need is a foreign influence registry. Have you ever been part of the Chinese Communist Party? Like, you need to name names. This kind of stuff. This is what it's all about. It's all about just treating China as if it's this massive, overwhelming threat. Even as China basically just says, like, "Hey, hello, how are you?" Like, it'd be as if like your neighbor came and knocked on your door and said hello, and then you started like spying on them through your windows. Like, this is the creepy way that we're acting in the world. Yeah, Mr. Chong, reached by the Globe, said he had no knowledge. He says he has relatives in Hong Kong. He was hit with sanctions in China after sponsoring the parliamentary motion on genocide that has been careful not to contact his relatives since. Like, here's a guy who's basically complaining that he supported the Canadian government's support of the fake, non-existent Uyghur genocide, and is complaining that China is like, can you not lie about us? Like, can you not lie about us? And he's like, oh, we should be able to lie about these people. Anyway. We'll just move on from it because I feel completely derailed on this. From the Financial Post, Toronto homeowners' cost of living has soared almost 60% in just 1 year. Here's a headline for you. If you're sitting out there being like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. He said capitalism's doing just fine. Capitalism's the way forward, in fact. Everything's completely fine. Toronto homeowners' cost of living has soared almost 60% in just 1 year. Like, the system is failing. The system is failing. And sometimes I think to myself, what is the point of what I'm doing here? What is the point of what I'm doing here? And the answer consistently seems to be, to help people who are dealing with the collapse, but B, to help people who are in a state of total delusion, state of total delusion about what's going on, and pretending as though the collapse is not happening. Like, that to me is the weirdest part about all of this. The people who are still walking around being like, you just need to get a better job. Like, what are you talking about? Like, what are you talking about? It'd be like saying you just need to put up nicer wallpaper in the house that's on fire. Like, it's just such a non sequitur that doesn't make any sense at all. Yeah, if they just need to pull up their bootstraps, if they just stop buying Starbucks, everything would be fine, right? Everything would be totally fine if they just stop. So they just need they're buying too much avocado toast, is what they're doing. When I was their age, I was making I made $2 an hour, and for inflation that was $1,000 an hour. But whatever, they just need to do better for themselves. I don't even know, guys. I don't know. It just seems like we are heading for a brick wall. Heading for a brick wall, and it doesn't seem like we're really trying to like even slow down. Doesn't even feel like we're trying to tap the brakes. It's like a demented old man is at the wheel of a vehicle and is driving us towards a brick wall. And everybody's screaming at him to hit the brakes. And the best he's willing to do is to say, okay, I'll tap the brakes. But then he doesn't. Right? Or maybe if he does tap the brakes, it's like the littlest, tiniest, just like just enough to push everybody into their chair for a second. Right? And that's essentially where we're at. And so is it any mystery, right? Is it any wonder why there are some countries that are actually taking to the streets? You've got France, right? France to me is leading the way entirely. That people need to basically be taking over their governments and basically be taking over the streets and taking over the infrastructure. And we're just not really doing it. Like we're just gonna watch the society burn around us with like a little dim-witted smile on our face. It's really wild. It's really, really wild. Oh yeah, sure, Bunny. I don't know what to call you except Bunny. I'm pretty politically ignorant. You seem kind of prickly. I'm not. I just don't like people that much, honestly. But maybe we'd be friends if you didn't mind. Sure, bud. I'm down. You'll find that I am a prickly sort of a fellow when it comes to these sorts of things, but maybe I'm just prickly because I'm frustrated. Maybe I'm just prickly because I'm a frustrated person, because I know that we could be doing a lot better than this as a people. I know that we could be doing a lot better than this as a people. That we are falling for really, really low level, poorly thought out, odd gaslighting that doesn't really acknowledge the collective need of the people. My ex, Mocked asks, how is Milo? My ex has taken Milo camping. So Milo is out in nature and out in the wilderness right now. So Milo is doing very well. Milo is doing very, very well. Thanks for asking for him, Mocked. Yeah, nationalism is the most powerful way to lead lost, aimless men into the meat grinder of war. Yeah, seems to be the case, John. Seems to be the case. That if if Cotton says, if John is prickly, I'm Lucifer. To me, this is what it is. Like it's just like we could literally eliminate homelessness. We could ensure that everybody is receiving an education. We could make this society so much nicer than this. That secondary education could be free. Healthcare could be free. That everything could be completely free and open, but we've just decided as a people that there needs to be this class of worthless parasites who provide no value whatsoever, who do nothing important for anyone at any moment, and are in fact a net drain on the society, but we have to make sure that they're the ones that make all the decisions. Like, this is fundamentally what we've done. What we're doing is we're trading a decent society away for one that pays fealty to just like a total group of losers who obviously are grifters and liars. Like, we're sitting here and we're all supposed to really give a damn about Elon Musk. We're all supposed to really care about people like Elon Musk. We're all supposed to really care about Bill Gates. We're all supposed to really care. And then when you investigate these guys, like, They're rich because their dad owned an emerald mine that they loaded with slaves. Bill Gates literally just privatized public funded systems. Like this idea that Bill Gates invented the computer is so just fucking ridiculous. Like, obviously not. That there was 100 years of computer research that was publicly funded, that he bribed a politician or two and got it privatized, and then took all of that public funded research, put it in a box, and sold it to us. And we all went, wow, this guy's a super genius. Like, we are allowing worthless parasites to parasiticize our society, and we are paying an incredibly heavy cost for it. And so, yes, I'm prickly. Yes, I'm prickly. Oh, nice belly. Thanks, bud. I appreciate that. This is the lowest possible level of thinking you could have in your head, right here. Doesn't get dumber. I love it when people say maybe not in a true capitalist society where everyone plays by the rules. This is a true capitalist society, bud. It's how it goes. This is the structure of capital. This is what's going on right here. Do you have a reading list to find Richard Wolff. Find Richard Wolff. Richard Wolff will get you to where you want to go really fast, dude. Yeah, true capitalism is an ideology that doesn't work in real life. Look, this is capitalism, right? That what we are living in is capitalism, and here's what it looks like. That there's a class of people who own everything, and there's a class of people who own nothing. And that the people who own nothing have to sell stuff to the people who own everything. And this builds in a eternal conflict in the society. You can't build a society this way. Oh, Grinning wants to do it. Grinning wants to do it. Let's do it. Let's talk about Chomsky and Epstein. Ding, 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 ding. We've done it. Good to see you, Grinning. Look, my take on this, and for those of you who don't know, renowned academic Noam Chomsky told the Wall Street Journal that his meetings with Epstein are none of your business. I don't think that there is a story here outside of the Wall Street Journal is trying to smear Chomsky. I think that's the bottom line. That Jeffrey Epstein was an individual that was well connected with lots and lots of people and lots of organizations. Noam Chomsky is not a billionaire. He's not a god king, right? Like, if Mike Pompeo and Jeffrey Epstein approach Noam Chomsky and say, sit down and have dinner with us and have a conversation, Chomsky's probably going to say yes, right? Like, it's not like he was on the island. It's not like any of this kind of stuff. Like, this... See, here we go, right? Now that this is the goal of the Wall Street Journal. This is the goal of the Wall Street Journal, is to now say, oh, we got to reanalyze Chomsky because he's now a pedophile. Right? That's the whole point. When really, what's the story? Like, Jeffrey Epstein has dinner with academic. Like, it's not like Chomsky went to the island, right? Like, Jeffrey Epstein gets on a bus with Bernie Sanders. So much for Bernie Sanders. Like, and the reason why I'm talking this way is not that I don't love Chomsky. And I think that this is correct. That I prefer Parenti over Chomsky. I think that Parenti's perspective, but that doesn't mean that Chomsky is bad. That doesn't mean that Chomsky is like this inferior intellect or something like this. And I don't even know that I agree with this idea that he aped inventing reality. Like, Chomsky wrote a book, helped write a book about about the media construct at the same time that somebody else was doing the same thing. Like, it's not really aping it. Like, it's not like Parenti has a like license for it or something, right? it would be so weird that one should discredit Chomsky's work even if he murdered a dude. But like, this is what I'm saying, is that like, what's the scale of the accusation here? That Chomsky happened to have dinner one time, and I don't think it was that he even had dinner. It was that his name was in. It was like scheduled that Jeffrey Epstein was going to sit down with Noam Chomsky at dinner, right? Like this is the scale of the accusation I feel like what is happening with this story is that it's getting blown up into this huge thing that it's not much of anything. Like, it really isn't much of anything. It's like, but even if it was, like, Chomsky talks to thousands of people a day. Like, he's constantly in correspondence with people back and forth all the time. Does he even know who this guy is while they're talking? Like, is he even aware of who Jeffrey Epstein is? Like, for real. Like, Chomsky's not a fucking god king with $100 billion or something. Like, he's just talking to people. And then, so what do you do if you're the Wall Street Journal and you want to try to discredit Chomsky? Because you've got Chomsky coming out very recently with an article that says the Russians are acting much more considerately in Ukraine than the United States did in Iraq. Right? This is the stuff that Chomsky is coming out with recently. And so the Wall Street Journal coming out, basically what the Wall Street Journal is doing is they're using Jeffrey Epstein as a political cudgel instead of actually investigating him. Like, this is the part of the conversation that I think is so fucking funny and so fucking hilarious, is that the Wall Street Journal should be investigating Jeffrey Epstein and the people who went to Jeffrey Epstein's island. Instead, they're doing this. Like, it's so obviously a hit piece. It's so obviously intended to be a way to discredit Chomsky. It's so obviously being done to drive a wedge between people's opinions of Chomsky, to create a wedge issue, to allow people to stop paying attention to the most cited American intellectual. Like, it's so obviously that is the case. And it's working. That's the part about it that I think is so ridiculous, is that it's actually working. That the news organization that refuses to actually investigate Jeffrey Epstein in a meaningful way, that refuses to go after all of the other people who are actually on his list, is publishing articles about Noam Chomsky happening to have like a couple of email exchanges and like a dinner. Like, what are you fucking talking about? Like, for real, like, if you are actually out there thinking that this in any way actually does diminish Chomsky in some kind of way, and you're starting to connect to your analysis of Noam Chomsky the idea that, oh yeah, you got to stop and give your head a shake. You got to stop and give your head a shake, because you're falling for it. You're falling for it. The goal of the Wall Street Journal is to do exactly that, and you're falling for it. So give your head that shake, recognize who your actual enemies are, recognize what your actual enemies want you to do, and recognize that you're falling for it, because you are falling for it. Like, Noam Chomsky is one of the most prolific intellectuals in America. You can disagree with him, that's fine. But just because he happened to walk across the same street that Epstein walked across at one point doesn't mean he's fucking little girls or something. Like, it doesn't put him on the same level as like Donald Trump or Bill Clinton or Bill Gates. And that's exactly what they're attempting to make you think. And it's working, near as I can tell. And it shouldn't. Like, we should be smarter than this, right? We should be smarter than this. It's obviously a hit piece. Like, it's obviously a hit piece. Like, the fact that this isn't the take, the fact that the internet is looking at this and actually even bringing up like the Parenti-Chomsky, like, there seems to be like a Parenti-Chomsky rivalry that I don't understand personally. Like, Chomsky is when it comes to internal domestic conversation, like what's the United States doing and how is it acting in the world, nobody's better than Chomsky. Like, nobody's better than Chomsky. Chomsky's written so much, he's done so much work. He's prolific. He understands the subject. Where is Chomsky weak? When it comes to analyzing other countries, that's where Chomsky's weak. Like when it comes to analyzing Soviet Russia, when it comes to analyzing China, when it comes to analyzing other countries. But by his own admission, he doesn't really do it. Because his position is that, well, we can probably change the way that we act, theoretically. That we can change the way our own country acts and operates. And if you care about that, well, then you can look at Parenti. Because Parenti does good work in that way. But I just feel like this whole story, by design, is being put forward in front of us to make like normies and centrists and people who maybe had a kind of like side-eye view of Chomsky to give them this like aha, I knew it moment, and to just confirm a bias. And that bias is based on what? It's based on what? The fact that a CIA-backed pedophile island-running obvious weirdo wrote in a book at one time, Dinner with Gnome. Like, I don't know, guys. Seems pretty shady. Like, seems like a shady story that I'm not really, like, I'm not sold on. Like, I'm not sold on it. So Gritting's going to bring up, like, I lost respect for Chomsky years ago, mainly for his insistence on voting as harm reduction. Yeah, I mean, Chomsky has, like, and I think it's just because, like, Chomsky is famously non-revolutionary. Like, he doesn't really have revolutionary positions. Like, everything that he says is does come from this place of, like, internal reform. That's more or less what his position essentially boils down to in all regards. And so it's a weak position because the system can't be reformed internally. That his whole hope, and I mean it is like optimistic, and so I don't hate him for it. It's an optimistic view. It's the view that we can actually reform the system internally. And that internal reform is possible, and so voting is a method, is one of the methods that is used to alter the system internally. I disagree with that because I think that the system only responds to external pressure. That the voting is just part of the pageantry, it's just part of the show, and that the system actually only responds to external threats of revolution. And anything outside of that, and the system will basically operate as it's intended to operate, as a cudgel from the capitalist class against the working class. That's the whole point. New York Times helped the feds track down the Pentagon leader. Yeah, these journal organizations like the Wall Street Journal have no credibility. Absolutely. Ben, good to see you, bud. I think voting can potentially be harm reduction. How can you blame marginalized groups for voting against fascists who want to genocide them? I mean, there is that, right? Like, there is that. Like, it's even if it is performative, right? Like, my background is theater. You guys know me, right? Even if it is just performative, well, the performances have a point. Like, there's a ritual to it. There's something real that matters to it. But we can't fool ourselves into believing that it's the only thing to do. I think that's where lots of people where lots of people are worried about where this would go. That people really do believe, like, oh, we just need to vote. Just vote. Right? Just vote. Just vote harder. Vote harder. That'll do it. But that's not the only thing to be done. It's not the only thing to be done. I have a solution to capitalism: local, semi-automated, vertical farms. So I like this idea, dude. Local, semi-automated, vertical farms, but it's not a solution to capitalism. Because capitalism will just own those farms, right? That the system of capital is actually that the system of capital is it's about who owns the means of production, right? So you can create all of these vertical farms, you can create all of this technology all you want, but if you cede the ownership of those farms to the capitalist class, then you just continue the problem. So hold on, somebody's asking here, how do you feel about Chomsky's take on the Ukraine-Russia conflict? Now, I don't know specifically what it is you're talking about there. Like, are you talking about Noam Chomsky's recent statement where he said that Russia is acting more kindly to Ukraine than we are to Iraq? I love this, Rick. Without capitalism, you wouldn't have this platform on the device you're on. No, without workers, I wouldn't have that. It's without workers, I wouldn't have that. The capitalists are the one that are extracting as much value and wealth for themselves away from the people who are actually providing that service, right? So when you say, like, when you give credit to capitalism for something that the workers have done, I don't really understand why you feel that you should do that. Like, why do you think it matters at all that there are these worthless parasites? No, no, bud. Like, you're simping for capital. Like, you're simping for capital. And simply saying you're lost, pal, doesn't mean anything to me. Like, it seems to me like you don't know anything about the subject, so I don't know why I should take you very seriously. It was very simply. Yeah, going back to the Chomsky comment in Ukraine, can you get just a little bit more specific? All right, can you get a little bit more specific? Because Chomsky said a lot about Ukraine. And I have my own positions. My opinion on that subject essentially boils down to I don't think that Russia had much of a choice. Really. I just don't think they had much of a choice. I think that the choice that capitalism makes countries richer, nope. Capitalism makes capitalists richer. That's what it does. And it turns the country, like, ask Iraq if capitalism's made countries richer. Ask Syria. Ask Libya. Ask the Palestinians if capitalism makes countries richer. Like, if all you do is just live in your little bubble, like, you're essentially saying train robbery makes train robbers richer, and so it's good. Like, yeah, TikTok chat. Yeah, you got to go where the people are, bud. Yep, capitalism, socialism, and feudalism don't make things. They only determine who owns things. That's right. Who has ownership of it. And I think you are a confi? What? Okay. Yeah, I'm... Hey, Snake, how you doing, bud? Yeah, thanks, John. Like, it's exactly what these guys are saying, right? That, like, train robbery makes train robbers rich, so train robbery must be good, right? Look how much wealth the train robbers are making. We should definitely just keep robbing trains, right? Yeah, meanwhile... Right? Meanwhile, we're just ignoring the climate crisis that's at our doorstep. Happy May Day to you. Happy May Day. I think you are confusing capitalism with fascism. Fascism is a subsect of capitalism. That how it works, right? So you've got capital ownership, right? And there comes a point when capital ownership is actually threatened by the public that they are actively exploiting and abandoning, right? That's how capitalism actually works. It exploits everybody around it for the benefit of a vanishingly small minority. And when the capital owners feel threatened enough, they begin enacting policies that we call fascist, right? Like, the rise of Hitler could not have happened without direct funding from the industrialist capitalists in Germany, for example. I'll pick capitalism / democracy over communism and totalitarianism. So that's basically just you saying, I'll pick a system I've been propagandized to believe over something I know nothing about. That's essentially what you're saying. Yeah. Look at Yugoslavia, a rich country but destroyed by American capitalists. Yeah. If you want to take a look at like real heartbreak in the modern era, right? Just you need to look no further than Libya, right? Libya under Gaddafi was the wealthiest country in Africa. It was growing faster than everybody else by a wide margin, just jumping forward and jumping forward and jumping forward, making everybody better off in Libya. Gaddafi famously said he wasn't going to give his own father a house before everyone in Libya was housed, and then managed it. And then the Clinton, Clinton State Department under Obama went in. Clinton famously said, "We came, we saw, he died, ha 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 ha," and cackled like a witch while they murdered Gaddafi. And now Libya is essentially a slave state again. So it's just absolutely absurd. So what do you think is a good government? If you want to take a look at the structure of a system that I think is actually doing good for its people, then you want to look up the National People's Congress. That's what I would do. Go to Google, type in the National People's Congress, read all about it, and you'll learn about a government system that has like 90% support from its people. It responds dramatically and quickly to the needs and the desires of its people. You'll find a system that everyone in the country that rules it, that is ruled under it, is really, really quite pleased by. And that country is China. There's a reason why we're getting all of this anti-Chinese propaganda. There's a reason why we're supposed to be terrified when China's walking around talking to people. There's a reason why we're supposed to be scared of China. And it's because China has a government that works. Like that's the thing that the capitalists are so terrified of, is that they don't want people to know that there is actually governmental models that work for the benefit of the people. And that we could do them, and we could make them happen. And I think the number one benefit that the National People's Congress has achieved is that it purposefully excludes capitalists from the system as a default. As a default, right? That it purposefully excludes the capitalists. It like we call capitalist corruption lobbying. They call it corruption. We seem to think that the capitalists have every reason to own the system that they're part of. They go, no, that's dumb. We should be rid of them. Just want a little bit more light. Yes, let there be light. You only get what you fight for, yeah? It's absolutely the truth. And that's what we're all really attempting to do here, right? That's all what we're really attempting to do here, is actually convince people that we could do a different system. We could do something different. Oh, I love this article that I found. If you don't use your land, these Marxists may take it. The landless workers movement organizes Brazil's poor to take land from the rich. It is perhaps the largest and most polarizing social movement in Latin America. I love it. Yeah, I love it. I hope that Brazil goes full-blown socialist. I hope it's an incredible, overwhelming, absurd takeover of the country. I hope it happens. Ben says, who believes these CSIS reports? Lots of people. Lots of people. The same people who believe that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. What kind of threat could we possibly pose to China that they would want to target us? Well, my thing is like, what a silly position to believe that China even feels the need to interfere with us. Like, there's this really popular adage that I think we should really understand, which is never interfere with your opponent when he's making a mistake, right? Like if we want to actually believe and fall into this idea that we are in opposition with China and that we are fighting against China, well, we're obviously screwing up. Like we're obviously making huge errors and making massive mistakes. And why would China ever feel the need to come in? Like this is the part of this that doesn't make any sense, and that really reveals how hysterical and conspiracy brained the whole conversation has become. Like all China needs to do is watch us collapse, like which we are. Like we are. The OECD has Canada pegged as the slowest growth, lowest level country in the developed, quote unquote, developed nations, like for decades to come. Why does China need to come in and do anything to interfere with us? Like if you're concerned that China's going to come in and undercut us and cause problems and all that kind of stuff, well, why? We're doing just fine on our own. We're doing just fine on that course by ourselves. Like we don't need China's help to do that. Yeah, Trudeau recently claimed that China uses like all the cobalt that is mined in every single device that we have is slave labor. Like this ridiculous absurdist. The Temporary Workers Act, the Temporary Foreign Workers Act is a slave labor document. Like this childish, like baby-brained idea that China's using slave labor, but we're definitely not. We're pure and above that. Like get the fuck right out of here. Like get out of here with that. It's so dim-witted. Like it's so dim-witted. Like if you actually care about that, then there is so much that we could do as our own country. Like the idea that we should point at another country and accuse them of something that we ourselves are guilty of is so dim. Yeah, that's about as much as we're capable of doing to them. Yeah, a war of words. But like, and it's so stupid. Like why? What's the goal here? And it's the type of thing that only makes sense when you put it within the power dynamics that must exist in a system of capital. That the capitalists are trying to convince us that it's good for the nation of Canada, but really it's just good for them. That's all it's about. Is that the capitalists here are actually very terrified of, and they call it authoritarianism. That's what they call it. Authoritarianism is the word that they use to describe it, which Trudeau has said that there's a rising authoritarian system and authoritarianism, which near as I can tell means passing laws and following them. That this is what the capitalists are very afraid of. They're afraid of people who are passing laws and then expect capitalists to follow those laws. And it's especially scary for the capitalists when it's non-capitalists who are passing those laws. So if you are like Xi Jinping and you are the son of a farmer who ascended through the ranks of the Chinese Communist Party, you never were a capitalist, you always were of the working class, and now you're the leader of the country passing legislation that benefits the country to such a degree that the party you're ahead of literally has like a 90% approval rating throughout China. Yeah, this is terrifying to the capitalists, especially as the government in China is willing to do things to completely destroy and undercut the capitalist class within their borders if it benefits their own people. Because China understands, and the Marxists in China understand, that getting rid of the capitalists, like they were always using the capitalists. The capitalists were too dim-witted to understand that they were being used. And and as they get chased out, exactly, Command Genius. Yeah, if you don't use your land, these Marxists might take it. Yeah, this is happening in Brazil. And like, we here in the West are so caught up in the idea that money matters. I just had this conversation earlier with people on the TikTok feed, right? That well, money, the people will leave with the money. They've got the money, right? Money. Well, but the money matters. No, it doesn't. The land matters. The money doesn't matter. The land matters. Who owns the land? Who owns the means of production? Like, when Karl Marx is writing the Communist Manifesto, he's not writing primarily, first and foremost, about who has access to the paper we print. He's writing about who owns the means of production, right? Who owns who owns the mills, who owns the forges, who owns the technology, who owns the land, who owns the buildings, right? But we here in the West have completely forgotten that that's the case, and we get caught up in these ideas that and China doesn't view it that way. China's not sitting there saying to itself, how do we make sure that one guy has $1 billion? That's what matters the most. Like, it's absolutely not their concern. And when financial structures collapse in China, they're just like, okay, that happened. We'll just take those assets and distribute them. Like, and it's getting really obvious, and we're going to absolutely pay for it. CR who? CR who? CR you. Just print the money. Land does matter. Capitalism actually fails when adverse possession is abolished. It's the one valve of safety against utterly irresponsible owners. China has the state as actual owner of all the land. Well, and the what we're doing here in the West, like, you could potentially make the argument that capitalism has any credibility whatsoever if it was actually allowing the capitalists to fail. Like, when the 2008 financial collapse happened, when the recent collapses of the banks happened just last month, I think, right? Like, if the system had have said, okay, yeah, you made bad bets and you're making bad decisions, so you're going to collapse, and we're other people will come in and the market will decide and all that kind of stuff, but none of that is happening, right? None of that is happening. That when the capitalists mess up, when they make bad bets or do bad loans or put in bad investments in, and then the whole thing explodes and goes completely tits up, they get bailed out, right? So right now, we're literally living in a structure, we're living in a system where the capitalists have no risk at all. That they can do anything they like, make any decision they like, based on any principle they like, and if it fails and they lose everything and they've got to lay a bunch of people off and it spreads misery throughout the land and causes everybody a bunch of problems, and if they poison the land, if they do all this kind of stuff, well, they get bailed out. So who cares? Like, they don't, clearly. Doesn't matter to them at all. This is why I think it's so funny when people I love this. It's true. China has no rich people. Like, I mean, there's a big history there, but like, we could talk about the Dengis period if you like. But the whole point about what China has done is it is spreading its own wealth amongst its own people. Like, China eliminated like 800 million people in poverty, dude. Like, you really got to have a very reduced view of what's actually happening in China to think that that the whole thing can just be dismissed because China has a couple of billionaires. Like, by a wide margin, the billionaire problem that exists in our society exists in the West. Chomsky, Epstein, who cares? Chomsky, Lakoff, or Chomsky, Foucault. Yeah. Like, I don't know, dude. Like, the Chomsky, Epstein story is so obviously a smear. It's, like, so obviously a hit piece that it's just... But it really does show you how desperate the capitalist class is becoming. That guy. China eliminated 800 million people in poverty? Dude, I've got exactly the right thing. Everyone in China is under arrest. Experts at the Very Rich Guy Foundation in Washington, D.C. estimate that the total number of detainees in China's sprawling network of prison camps could be as high as everyone. Even the prison camp guards have all been thrown into prison camps, said a source. The CCP did not trust them. The entire CCP is also in the camps. They arrested themselves too. Even President Xi Jinping could not escape. You got me, that guy. Yeah, communism fails again. The evil CCP eliminated 800 million people in poverty. China billionaires that interfere in politics get told to sit down, lose equity, exiled. It's not a problem to the political system that billionaires exist. Well, and the plan was always that you'd allow foreign capital to come in, that a small group of people, like they knew that this would happen, and that then they would smooth it out. That was always the plan, right? It was always the plan. And if you want to see the major differences in how the system responds, you just need to take a look at the 2008 financial crisis. That in America, the 2008 financial collapse happened, and the rich got bailed out. Nobody got punished whatsoever. And it was just continue going as if it was not a problem whatsoever, right? In China, a similar collapse happened, and billionaires got prosecuted. Some of them got executed, and the land that they all lost got taken from them and distributed into the populace. Like, there's a stark difference between what happens in these two systems. And just because there happens to be some billionaires that exist, well, the Communist Party is aware. They know that has happened. That's part of the plan. And they're spreading it out and moving towards a more egalitarian model. But in the interim, they're using the wealth that generated for the benefit of their own people. Like, which is, again, the major difference. That if that kind of wealth disparity, well, I mean, we don't even need to say if it did exist in America. When that wealth disparity exists in America, we know exactly what happens. The Americans take the wealth, they jam it into offshore accounts and tell everybody around them to get fucked. Work harder. You're complaining too loudly. You must be lazy, right? It's not what happens. It's not the same story. John Gautreau, there's an army of cocaine-guzzling vultures who've usurped the infinite money glitch machine of statecraft, and they'll probably defend it to the last speck of toxic dust. Yeah. No, these people have proven, they've shown very clearly that they're willing to destroy the planet. Like, they will absolutely poison the air if it means they get to keep their money. That it is money worship is what it is. That they will exchange clean air, water, and land. There's that famous First Nations phrase. Here, let's see if we can find it. It won't be until the last river is poisoned. Yeah, I think this is essentially it, right? Like, you see this when you're in your 20s and you kind of think, oh yeah, okay, but then you get older. Right? Only when the last tree has died and the last river has been poisoned and the last fish has been caught will we realize we cannot eat money. And this is this is the beating heart of it all. That we are living in a society that has genuinely convinced itself that we can destroy literally everything. Literally the air, the water, the land. We can destroy all of it. We can destroy all of it because we have money. It can't be sustained. It won't be sustained. And the people who are in charge are genuinely convinced that they're going to be fine because they have all the money. Like, we're going to learn some very hard lessons. We're going to learn some very, very hard lessons. Or I shouldn't say that. We're going to experience some very hard times as a people, because I'm not convinced that Westerners are capable of learning lessons. I'm not convinced that the West is actually interested in learning lessons. I think that we are interested in subserviating ourselves to systems of capital. That's what I think that we're all about. And that the worship of money, even as the ecosystem begins to collapse around us, is going to persist. It's incredible to watch. It's absolutely incredible to watch. Like, I have these existential moments where I begin to really ask myself. I'm from the West, that's for sure. I wouldn't say that I'm a Westerner. I repudiate the West. I think that there's nothing here that can be salvaged. And I was about to explain why. Because we are all existential creatures. Like, we're essentially randomly generated. We can't control where we start. We can't control where we are. We can't control things like our ethnicity, our background. Like, we can't control who our parents are. We can't control a lot of things. But we can come to terms and realize that there's more to life than these sort of pathetic systems that will absolutely be blown away by the wind. That we are human first, right? That's the most defining characteristic of what we are. And even deeper than that, we are part of this incredible existential system that says, what the hell is this place? What are we? What are we doing here? What's the point of all of this? And I can tell you with a great deal of confidence that we weren't randomly generated into this plane of existence to work for psychopaths who are exploiting our need for food and shelter. Like, that's not what we're up to. And the system that generated us is not going to tolerate it, and is not tolerating it, and will not continue to tolerate it. Because the larger, more important questions are what the system is interested in discovering. That we are essentially giving voice to creation itself, a creation that's attempting to figure itself out and trying to discover what it's here for and what it's here to do. That is essentially what we are. And if we're not focusing on that and we're focusing on some other shit, then the universe will destroy us for it and then erect something that'll do the job properly. Like, we have pitted ourselves against reality itself, and I'm here to tell you, I'm here to tell you that reality is going to win every single time. Communism will never ever work because people are greedy and dishonest by nature. I love these sorts of comments because it's communism will never work because capitalism. Communism doesn't work because then you define capitalism. Like, it's sort of an odd. And this, I don't really care for this argument, Bud, because it's the human nature argument, right? That all slavers throughout all time have used, right? That the pro-slavers of the Confederate South said that slavery was human nature, right? You can't get rid of slavery because it's just human nature. Like, why make laws? Like, why make a law? Like, so what if it is? Right? Like, so what if it is? Like, why make a single law? Why did we write down at any point murder is bad? Right? Like, murder is human nature, right? So why even make a law about it? Why punish people? Just let people murder each other. It's human nature, right? Like, it's the human nature argument, the more you uncover it and think about it, the worse it gets. Like, the worse it gets. Yeah, if we can't stop criminals, why have laws? It's fundamentally it. Like, that's essentially the basis of the human nature argument. And in a lot of ways, it's just like a big, huge self-report. Like, it's just this massive self-report. Like, I'm selfish, and so I assume everyone else is selfish, and so this is just natural for everyone to be selfish because I'm selfish. Like, it's just this enormous, massive self-report. Well, and also, like, I don't know why we're supposed to listen to what the adherents of capitalism have to say about what happened under communism. That seems to be basically the argument, that, oh, the people who hate communism said that communism killed a bunch of people, so it must be true. Probably not, right? Like, just in a basic, like, you know, chances are good that the antagonist of the other person of the other person is probably not telling the truth. Right? Like, it's probably, at the very least, like, making the numbers higher than they should be. Like, the Black Book of Communism is my favorite for this, right? they literally included Nazis in the figure. It's just like, okay, so we're done here, right? Like, you're gonna actually say that that Nazis are victims of communism. Okay, we're finished. Like, we don't need to continue. Who says, nicely put, the universe didn't put us here to serve violent psychos, and if we do what we just deserve to be exterminated by each other as they laugh and die out for lack of slaves. Yeah, like, and so, like, I don't really consider myself, like, I am of the West. I exist in the West, certainly. I don't really consider myself a Westerner, though, because, like, I consider myself to just be kind of a visitor of this plane of reality. I was randomly generated into this plane of reality. I'm looking around, just trying to call it for what it is. Just trying to see what's going on in here. And I used to have I'm trying to be more forgiving of people who are still caught in a smaller way of looking at the world, because it's natural, and I too was caught in that. Like, when I was growing up, I was a Christian fundamentalist that thought that homosexuality was a sin and that Jesus Christ was coming back at any moment and all of this sort of ridiculous bullshit. And I say that to remind myself not to be arrogant, not to be upset when other people are caught in that, as I was caught in that, and that it took a great deal of work and exploration and realization to come to these sorts of positions that I have now, which is that, again, I'll say it again, because it's fundamentally true. We're all randomly generated. No one knows what's going on. We are more energy than material. We're certainly not here to just work our lives away for people we don't need, and then die not having achieved anything that matters whatsoever. That there are large-scale, massive forces that are obviously at play, and that should be who we're allied with, or what we're allied with. We shouldn't be allying ourselves to borders that we invented in the first place. We shouldn't be allying ourselves to the place that we were born in. We shouldn't be allying ourselves to skin color. We shouldn't be allying ourselves to any of those sorts of strange, ephemeral, secondary, tertiary byproducts of existence. That we should be looking at existence itself and saying, well, what does it need? What does existence require of us? And if we don't do that, as we don't do that, then existence itself will simply turn around and say, "Oh, yes, yeah, we'll get rid of you. You're not doing the job. Like, you're not facilitating this. Like, off you go." Like, this planet will turn itself into ice, or it'll turn itself into a desert, and it'll get rid of us. And it'll regenerate itself the way that it's regenerated itself countless times before, and then a new life form will come up, and maybe that life form will look around and be like, "Oh, reality exists, you guys. Have you noticed that reality exists?" Like, more and more and more, this feels like what it is that I'm doing. It's just sort of pointing at reality and telling everybody, "Hey, did you know that reality exists? And that it has rules, and that there are things that you can do and things that you shouldn't do in reality." And then somebody says something that's akin to, like, "But the earth is flat." It's so funny to me that we seem resistant, oddly, and this is an odd little thing, but it does seem to be the truth, that we are resistant to the idea that reality exists, and that reality is much stronger and bigger and more powerful than we are. And I don't know, it's somewhat understandable. Each of us want to believe that we are more powerful than we are. That we come into this reality with this sort of energy that wants to believe that it is the energy. That I am the player and everyone else is an NPC. It's a very common way of looking at the world. And nobody wants to take a step back and go, no, we are all players, and everybody's game is the same. Or at least has the same validity. That's the hardest thing, I think, especially for Western capitalists to accept. that everybody's game is exactly the same in terms of its validity. Like there's no end score screen. There's no measurement. You're not gonna die and a screen's gonna pop up and said you win because you got a big number or something, right? Nobody's gonna give a shit about the size of your house or how many Bugattis you have or whatever. Like, none of that matters. It's all just garbage that you're just filling your time with. Like we we genuinely could be embarking on enormous, massive exploration projects about what's going on in reality. Not so that we can make money, right? Not so that we can create some kind of model in order to interact with the market more effectively, but so that we could learn about it and know something about what's going on in this place. But we're ruled by people who don't give a shit about that, who don't care about that at all. Right? That if it doesn't generate money, if it's not for the sake of making money for me, then it can never happen. And then everybody says that capitalism's the greatest system, and it's just like, oh, okay. Even though it's like the antithesis of human life, like you genuinely think that you're just here for money. And it's like what people say when I say everyone should have their needs taken care of, everyone should have food and shelter taken care of, and then people have the absolute audacity to say, well, if everybody has their needs taken care of, then they'll just sit around and do nothing. And I'm just like, what the fuck are you even talking about? Like, what an embarrassment. What an embarrassing thing to say out loud. Like, and again, just like a massive self-report. Just say you're boring, dude. Like, just say you're boring. Just admit it. Just admit that you're boring, that you don't have a thought in your head, that you've got nothing really going on. And so you're completely willing to sell all of your time to a system of capital because you don't really have anything else going on in your life, and you're too afraid of yourself and of what's going on in reality and you're afraid that you'll recognize that you don't really have anything interesting to offer. And so you'll actually have to confront yourself, and you'll actually have to build yourself up in a way that's interesting. Like, people are afraid of themselves. They're terrified of themselves. And they're willing to just sell themselves out to a system of capital if it means that they never need to investigate their own selves. If it means that they never need to look inward. If it means that they never need to learn anything about themselves. If it means that they never need to admit their own failure or their own fault. If it means that they never need to actually do any meaningful self-analysis. No, my life mattered because I had nice cars, is kind of where we're at. Well, somebody's saying this guy speaks the truth. That's kind of you. This guy is projecting so much. I find that typically the people who say that are themselves the ones who are projecting, dude. Like, tell me where I'm wrong. Like, tell me where I'm wrong. Oh, we got a Cuban conversation happening. Yeah. The people of Cuba are better off for communism by a lot, and it's not close. That before the Cuban Revolution, the United States, with the help of Batista, was essentially erecting a slave state there. That the people who live in Miami and Florida that complain that, they took away my family's plantations were essentially slavers. Or it's not much different than listening to Confederate Southerners complain that the Northerners came and got rid of their slave plantations, right? And the people of Cuba are much better off for having communism. If you want to actually argue for the benefit of the Cuban people, you should be arguing in favor of getting rid of the sanctions. That the United States basically has attempted to sanction Cuba into eternal poverty, and it's not working. The Cuban people are building their society up steadily, and ultimately what it means is that Cuba is just going to start trading with China. And that's when Cuba's going to get really wealthy. But we'll see how that all goes. Yep, Cuba has more doctors. Get this. This is a fun little fact that people don't like to admit. can you explain how capitalists have nothing going on in their lives? Yeah, I mean, so you wake up, you go to a job you hate, work at a task that's probably destroying your community, right? Or if it has value at all, right, is probably destroying your community, is probably doing something negative in the community. You probably work for people who you don't know, and if you do know them, then you probably hate them. And then you come home, jerk off to Netflix, go to sleep, wake up, do it again, right? What's going on in my life? Oh my man, what's going on in my life? You see, life is about a self-exploration. You're basically asking me my history, right? So when I started in a small town of Portage La Prairie, Manitoba, town of 16,000 people. I would describe myself now as like a fundamentalist Christian nationalist, that I believed that it was wrong to be gay. I don't think I ever was, and I don't think my community ever was at that point where we were willing to say out loud that white people were superior. But looking back on how we were acting, we definitely had that attitude, especially in regards to the First Nations people around us. And I basically was given the choice at a young age of essentially just follow the path of capitalism, right? Stay in that small town, keep working at a job, some factory work, maybe help my dad out with his business, although it was a failing business because of the system of capital. Instead, I decided to go out and explore the world and to try to find something out about it. And through doing that, so I've traveled all across Canada, right? I've lived in Toronto. I've lived in the East Coast. I did some beekeeping on the East Coast. I lived in Ottawa for a period of time. Back to Toronto, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And through that process of exploration, not just of reality, but also of my own systems and also of my own thinking and my own patterns, I was able to shake off this Christian nationalism and also create a stronger, more articulated sense of the structure of capitalism and why it's failing us. And and I mean, when you live in the center of Canada, dude, like I mean, I could go live in Alberta if you like. Although I wouldn't mind spending a stint in British Columbia, but it doesn't. I don't know. It's just never called to me. In any case, and through that process, like, I could tell you pretty cleanly that the person I am now is a better person, like a better person than the person I was. And essentially what capital would have said to me is, no, you need to hunker down where you are. You need to get a job. You need to work at that job, make a lot of money. And maybe I could have done that. Maybe I could be wealthy right now. I know people, like I have people in my family who did exactly that. And they've got a house and they got kids and they got all that kind of stuff. But they're Christian nationalists. They don't have a lot going on. So we have erected a system that essentially deadens the human spirit, deadens our capacity for growth, deadens our capacity to learn anything about ourselves and about everybody around us, and essentially says sacrifice all that for money. And I watch people do that all the time. I watch people do that all the time. It's not on accident. Like, we send kids to school for a decade to convince them that this is the right way to be. Thank you, Leon. I like this shirt too. They promised they were going to put the billboard back up. This is a Honest Ed's shirt. It's a Toronto famous establishment from the Mirvishes. The building got bought, and the storefront got torn apart. And they promised they were going to put the sign back up, but they never did. So, big surprise. Capitalists lied. Dr. Hugh spitting some fire in the chat. Ukraine is a fake CIA Nazi country. The Nazis patronized the Betlerites and Banderites. Then after World War II, the CIA paid Bandera, at least and probably longer, quietly. Sadly, after 1991, the CIA just came back and eventually restarted World War II, almost automatically, just as BlackRock, Cargill, Bayer, Chevron all got handed insane rights in Donbass. Yeah. Poland finally announced the 6 oblasts they want to take back, all in Poland or Hungary. The new border will be the west edge if Zolotar and Vinnytsia, probably. Yeah, that's actually the scariest part of what I've been seeing in the Ukraine conflict currently, is that Hungary and Poland have been pretty openly talking about breaking apart Ukraine. That they kind of want to do it peacefully, but it's not going to happen peacefully. So that's pretty terrifying. That's pretty terrifying. Yeah, who dropping pure gas? Well, the Ukraine crisis is a major strike point, right? Like, it's a major strike point. Some serious things can happen, and have happened because of the Ukraine crisis. And here in the West, we're stuck on this idea that Putin is acting the way he's acting because he's crazy. He's a madman, and just completely ignoring our own actions in the region. I don't know, Amanda. I don't know what's going on. I've tried my best to make sure that everybody can see everything, but it is as it is. Yeah, they're going to break Ukraine like an egg. Like, Putin himself has said, and there has been some historical commentary, that like Ukraine probably should have never existed as the country. Like, the borders should not have been drawn the way that they were drawn in the first place. And John suggests change the comment filter settings to all comments. Yeah, I don't know why YouTube censors some things and doesn't censor some stuff, Amanda. It's just how it is. You're not the first person who's said that, but my settings haven't changed an iota, bud. Let me see if maybe there's something over here. No, I'm all the way up. So I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to tell you, bud. Here, would this help? Yeah, let me get the mic out of here. How about this? Today here on John Sanderson Radio, we're having a conversation with Leon. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with YouTube or anything, dude. Like, it's a miracle that they don't just ban me straight out. It's gonna happen soon, I'm sure, but what can you do? So you should know you don't actually own anything under communism. Well, that's not necessarily true, right? And that's never been the argument. Like, that you own everything. What have I done in the last 3 years, Mr. Canadian? I've started this YouTube channel. That's something I'm very proud of. I've started this YouTube channel. I've written some really good music. I've written some really good music that I'm really, really proud of. And so, sorry, Compton. I'm sorry, bud. For all of you with the earphones in. Oh, dude, I'm sorry, bud. I should have thought that through a little bit more. And yeah, I was able to get this YouTube channel off the ground. I'm able to start it up. It's actually being much more successful than I thought it was going to be. I didn't think it was going to go anywhere. And more or less, I'm just trying to survive the apocalypse at this point. Yeah, and that's true. Act like you have to accomplish something to critique capitalism. Yeah, as if everybody's opinion isn't valid, right? Like, one should say that it's the people who are the most victimized by capitalism that should be listened to the loudest, right? This attitude that people have, where people who fail shouldn't be listened to. It's a very odd idea, frankly. Like, shouldn't we try to learn something? Like, why did that person fail? And if all you're going to do is say, well, they are a screw up, then you're not going to figure anything out, right? You're not going to figure anything out. But that's the whole point. Like, capitalists don't want people to figure things out. Marx says the distinguishing feature of communism is not the abolition of property generally, but the abolition of bourgeois property. Yeah, that's the distinguishing, like, that's the difference between personal property and private property, right? That you can own what you want, but you don't get to own the means of production, right? Like, you can have a home, right? You can have a car, like, you can have personal property, like, there's no problem with that at all. But the trouble comes when you start saying that you should own things that are of the common good, right? You should be able to own the common. You should be able to own the commons. You know, that's the idea that communism is working against. Command Genius says, isn't socialism technically authoritarian? Since in collectivization, the government owns everything, making it authoritarian? I don't know why I'm supposed to be afraid of this word. Authoritarian. Near as I can tell, authoritarian means let's pass laws and then follow those laws. That's what authoritarian seems to mean. And I don't know why I'm supposed to be afraid of that concept. That, oh, we all come together, we elect a ruling class, preferably the people we select from that ruling class would actually be part of the working class instead of the capitalist class. And then that ruling class passes laws that even the ruling class follows. Authoritarian. Why am I supposed to be afraid of that? Like, I understand that there is this sort of 1984 style conception of this word authoritarian that says, you know, a tyrant will take over and start pass. But I see that happening here in capitalism. Well, you think Doug Ford's not a fucking authoritarian? Like, Doug Ford is literally making it easier to become a cop. Like, he's basically paying for people to become cops, and while refusing to pay for post-secondary education for anybody else, and removing the need for post-secondary education. So essentially what we're ending up with is a bunch of dumb people becoming cops. That's basically what's going to happen in the province of Ontario. But that's not authoritarian. That's not authoritarian, right? It's not authoritarian to literally flood the streets with cops. Right? No, it's authoritarian if you pass a law saying you can't poison this river, and then if a capitalist poisons the river, you punish him. That's authoritarian, right? Content says, Hassan succeeded in capitalism and he complained about capitalism. These people have a reason to say he's wrong or shouldn't complain. Elon has criticized capitalism plenty. He doesn't think highest bidder logic should apply to things like AI, which are dangerous, and he never says NASA shouldn't exist or funded with tax money. He just wants to do the launch parts cheaper and better and get to other planets himself eventually. I mean, I think that Elon Musk is a grifter. Fairly straightforwardly. Like, I think that he's basically a grifter. And that his whole, like, he obviously wants to be viewed as this, like, super genius person. Like, I really think that what we're seeing is somebody who just wants everybody to really like him. And was born with $1 billion, and so he's using that money to just get, you know what everybody will love? Everybody will love this. Oh, everybody will love that. Everybody will love this. And he wants to be perceived as this super genius, like Tony Stark fellow. When, I don't know, he seems kind of dim-witted, frankly. Like, he seems pretty low level in terms of his intelligence. If you want to really listen to, like, take the stars out of your eyes, like, put aside the worship element, the whole cult element of it, and, like, go listen to his interview with Joe Rogan. And I remember I listened to him talking to Joe Rogan, and as soon as you stop listening to Joe going, whoa, no way, oh, you whoa. As soon as you stop listening to Joe doing that shit, and you start actually, like, attuning your skepticism a little bit, you realize pretty fast that Elon Musk is a pretty stupid person. Like, he's like, maybe normal, but I actually think he's pretty dumb. That, like, I think he's just trying to get his daddy's love. Really, I think he's just trying to impress his daddy, and because his daddy didn't hug him enough, and that's it. Daddy will love me if I'm Tony Stark. Daddy will love me if I'm a billionaire. Daddy will love me if I make electric cars. Daddy will love me. Like I just don't see a very intelligent person. I see a pretty competent grifter, but you don't need to be smart to be a grifter. Like you don't need to be that intelligent to be a grifter. You just need to be willing to be a grifter, right? Because there's not that many of them. And if you're willing to be a grifter, then you can really exploit people's trustworthiness and people's and I mean, for God's sakes, once you have $1 billion, you can just like get on the front cover of, and people are just like, wow, this guy must be a super genius, super smart. Like, nah, he was born with $1 billion because his dad had a slave mine. Like, people would think you were smart too, dude. Like, people would think you were smart too if you had a $1 billion and you told everybody you were super smart through like Wall Street Journal magazine ops and things like this. Just to let everybody know, you're getting told what to do now, and socialism will also tell you what to do. It won't be alien to experience getting told what to do under socialism. Well, the idea is under a socialist system, the people who are getting elected are not of the capitalist class, right? That there's this concept within Marxism called the dictatorship of the bourgeoisie, that we live under a system of bourgeois capital, that the only people who can get elected are the rich. And you can see that in the creation of the Constitution of America. And James Madison said it the most explicitly, that power should reside within the wealth of the nation, right? That only the rich should be the ruling class. And so it doesn't matter who you elect. They're never going to vote their wealth away, right? They're never going to they're never going to vote their wealth away. And so what we need is a dictatorship of the proletariat, right? And a dictatorship of the proletariat says that capitalists can never be elected on purpose. That if you own property, you cannot be part of the electoral system. And that's just fundamentally understood because capitalism is viewed and capitalists are viewed as corrupt. And so you push them out of the system entirely. And so if you have a capitalist in the society, they're operating in a system that's actively working to push them out. And does. The problem isn't the personalities. The problem is when Bezos faces off against Branson or Musk. It's the capitalist mode of mindless competition. Yeah. It doesn't matter if you win or lose in capitalism. These folks will just come up with every excuse why no one should complain. Yeah. Just stop complaining. Eat your gruel. Elon is a grifter other than genius, like most capitalists. I'm just trying to get us to get away from caring about the personalities of the billionaires at all. They're not special. Yeah, there's no supervillains and no superheroes, really. Just some people good at grift. Yeah, what you're hitting on is just this reality that, like, it's the system that's the problem. That the system generates and rewards grifting, and it rewards psychopathic behavior. So even if you were to get rid of all of the grifters and get rid, somehow if you were to miraculously be able to get rid of these people, well, the system itself would generate more. And the ruling class would become littered with more of these people, because that's how the system is designed to work. And if we want to change that, we can't hyper-focus on personalities, which I myself am guilty of, I admit. But we need to focus on changing the system itself. And we can't expect the people who are generated by the system to be willing to do that. Because it's completely against their interests. Jeez, my nose is so itchy all of a sudden. Sorry, guys. What do I think of red pills? Which one's red pill? The internet has this whole logo right now where it's like red pilling, black pilling, and I don't think I know what pill is which. Off-brand Vosh. Yeah, I'm happy to be off-brand Vosh. I gotta tell you, I'm not an FBI snitch, so that helps, and I'm not an imperialist, so that helps, and I tend to know what I'm talking about, so that helps too. I'm really happy to be off-brand. Isn't the desire to change the system one of the tenets of anarchism? I think that's just sort of a leftist idea generally. Uh, uh, like I don't. I feel like if you're on the left, you're about changing the system. That you are fundamentally saying, like, you are in opposition to conservatism, right? That conservatism is about maintaining the system, which is why conservatives are all about you're the trouble, you're the problem, you just need to get better. It's all about you, right? This gaslighting individualism that we're all underneath right now. That sort of Petersonian, like, you just need to get better at your life and stop complaining about the hierarchy, blah, 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 blah. Meanwhile, the hierarchy is literally collapsing. And but once you get over the gaslighting and once you recognize that, like, no, there are major forces, major societal forces that are working against the interests of the people, then you start to move further to the left. And I don't really like the anarchists. Every time I talk to, I've said it again and again, and I'm sure It's Grinning is in the chat, and he'll be sure to comment on it. I'm positive. I think that the anarchists are great. I think that I hope that they achieve what they set out to achieve. Every time they talk about it, I'm just like, great. I hope that works out. I don't think it will, but I hope it. I hope it does. Not the good red. Red pill brings you to the less comforting but supposedly more real understanding. Blue pill to the more comforting but less real. Oh yeah, okay. It's Matrix talk, isn't it? Like, that's really what it is. It's like, you take the red pill, you take the blue pill. It's. I like that the Matrix. I feel like that's the one thing that we can credit Andrew Tate with. That Andrew Tate has brought the Matrix back into the conversation. And everyone I've spoken to that claims to have been red-pilled or right-wing conspiracy nuts. I mean, I went through my conspiracy period, and in many ways this is, like, this is conspiracy adjacent, right? Like, we are trying to discover what is real, and we are trying to have conversations about what is or is not real. Speaking of things that are real, please be sure to like, share, subscribe, hit the bells, hit the whistles. If you've got $1 in your pocket, think about donating, right? Become a Patreon. I don't like that we have to deal with money, but here we are. If I can get more people supporting me on this channel, I can become more politically active, which is the whole goal. Yeah, QAnon, all of this kind of stuff. Like, one of the things that I think is, like, QAnon, in my view, really arises because of the failure of the system of capital. That no one trusts the institutions. No one trusts the institutions any longer. No one trusts the institutions any longer. And if they don't trust the institutions any longer, then people are going to start looking for what's real and what's true in other places. And this is where conspiracy really comes out of. And it's worse than it ever has been. That our media apparatuses, our education systems, our churches, like, our banks, there is no institution in the West that has credibility anymore or is trustworthy any longer. And so this belief that we will this collapse of credibility has people looking for truth everywhere. And it's rife for grifters. It's rife for cults. It's rife for people to come in and be like, I've got the truth. Here, I've got something to say. And there's this really fascinating documentary. If you want to get into QAnon stuff, I highly recommend watching QAnon Beyond the Storm or something. It's got that kind of title to it. And it's a fellow who started to investigate QAnon the moment QAnon began. That people started showing up to Republican rallies with these cues, and he was immediately like, what is this? Who are these people? I need to talk to these people right now. and he started doing interviews, and he basically found the guy who was doing it. He found and essentially outed the guy who was at the heart of the whole operation. And near as I can tell, it was and still is a weird little cult that exists because there's no such thing as a credible institution in America any longer. And this, in my view, is why Christian fascism, as Amanda mentions, like, it's easy to become conspiratorial if you are a Christo-fascist, right? Because you already believe that there's a man in the sky that's coming back, right? Command Genius, you're really doubling down on this idea, but we've run polls, man. Like, we've got, where is the good one that I always like to show? Like, there it is. Like, we ask. Like, I'm sure that you can find people who speak the way that you're speaking right now, but we ask, right? Was life better under communism? Even in Ukraine, 75% of people said yes. You got Moldavia, right? Romania, Hungary. So, like, and of course there are places that, like Poland, for example, is 47%. So, of course, there's, like, mixed kind of ideas. But the idea that, like, exclusively 100% of people from Eastern Europe are like, communism is a terrible, horrible thing. Probably not, bro. Like, I'm sure that you spoke to one person. Like, I'm sure that happened. Command Genius. Like, I'm sure that you had one conversation with one person. Like, I'm not trying to discredit that one conversation you had with that one person. Okay. 5 people. I'm sure you had a conversation with 5 people. Like, there's like a billion, there's what, 7-8 billion people? Like, it's a big subject. It's a big subject. And yeah, like so the conspiracy brain, it's easy for Christians to become conspiratorial because Christians already believe in an enormous conspiracy, like just this enormous grand conspiracy that has incredible institutional backing. And the conspiracy is that there's a wizard that was walking around the Middle East two millennia ago, that was so powerful that he could produce miracles, but couldn't escape capture from the Roman Republic and was crucified, came back to life, ascended, and is definitely coming back to help all the white people at any moment. That this conspiracy exists and persists throughout America and throughout the West pretty dramatically. And if you can believe that, then you can basically believe anything, right? Like, if you can believe that there's a wizard coming back at any moment, and you're always looking over your shoulder, and when you jerk off, you're really thinking about what Jesus thinks about it, and when you're doing all your daily activities and all this, you're really thinking about what the Holy Spirit has to say about it, right? You really think God gives a crap. Then you can fall for it, right? You can fall for it. And if you can fall for that, you can fall for anything. I mean, I don't know what to tell you, Command Genius. Like, I'm sure you seem very passionate, right? You seem very passionate about it. I don't know anything about the conversation that you had. I don't know who this person is. I don't know who they worked for. I don't know when they were there. Like, how old is this person? Again, I'm not post-communist, right? Like, the fall of the Soviet Union happened in the 90s, right? So chances are good. It sounds very emotional, right? But who is this person? Like, who's this person? Like, I'm sure that Nazis would cry about it, if they were on a voice call with you. Like, I don't know who this person is. Like, I'm just not going to overturn my way of thinking because you had a call with somebody who was crying on the other line. Like, it's not very persuasive or convincing. They're a fascist. Okay, bud. I'm happy that they were crying. I'm glad that they were crying. I hope that the communists went after them. I'm completely and totally fine with that. Fairly unconvincing, gotta tell you. Oh no, a communist made a fascist's life worse. Good. I'm glad that happened. I don't know what to tell you, bud. Like, fascists should have a worse life. That they should be doing worse, and I'm glad that they did. Who am I talking to? I've got a YouTube link. I got a YouTube link in the description if you want to join in with that conversation. I'm more readily talking to people on the YouTube channel for fairly obvious reasons. Fairly obvious reasons. How could we stop AI? AI is so overblown, guys. Like, it is actually so overblown. Like, it's this idea that it's a little column A, a little column B, Lola. I understand. I should maybe make this a little bit more descriptive. You're not wrong, Lola. This used to be more descriptive. I changed it recently. I should change it again. This is good feedback, Lola. Thank you. I'll change this for next time. Thank you, Lola. Appreciate that. I think that AI is just being sold to us. Like, I think that AI, like the new AI generative systems like ChatGPT and all of that are interesting, and they certainly are disruptive. I'm not trying to pretend like they're not disruptive, but they're being oversold, just like everything else, right? That everything else is being oversold, and like the Mars journey is being oversold. Oh, Command Genius, I feel you there, bud. You felt bad because they were crying. Your emotions took control. Yeah, that's part of it, dude. That's part of the fight, right? Like this thing I've got behind me, right? You guys on TikTok can't see it, but behind me I've got a chakra poster. There it is. That's not there just because I like the way it looks. It's not there because I think it's pretty, even though it is, right? It's there because we are emotional creatures, and we should have very, very, very serious conversations openly all the time about our emotions, all the time. And acknowledging that your emotions took control, that's the best thing you can do. That's a very important first step, because people can get swept up into their emotional selves. That we can get swept into just all kinds of ridiculous, like the Iraq War. The Iraq War was completely emotionally driven. It was entirely America just lashing out of anger, not thinking itself through at all. When people like to forget this. When George W. Bush invaded Iraq, he did so with overwhelming support from the American people. Polls had as high as 85% support amongst the American people saying, go into Iraq, let's go, let's do it. That the Americans were frothing at the mouth for war, and it was all of it was based on a complete loss of control of our emotions. That we were all flying the American flag post 9/11. And 9/11 put everybody into just an emotional fervor. And that's why I think we should talk more openly. I choose the chakra system to discuss our emotions because I think it's the cleanest way to discuss our emotional selves and to put our feet on the ground and to gain control of our emotions as quickly as possible. But there are other systems, of course. And so Command Genius, it sounds to me like you had a very intense conversation. I know you're a young man. I know you're a young man, and so it's easier for you to get swept in to emotional conversations, to big emotional conversations. But I'm glad that you felt that you could come here and talk to me about that. And I'm glad that you're saying aloud that you have these emotions. It's good. It's all very good. The lesson for you, my man, is to find systems and find ways to figure out faster that your emotions are in control, and to take control, or to run with those emotions faster. That should be the goal. That should be the goal. It's not simply like this is what's so kind of weird about the journey that we are on as socialists and communists and anarchists and all of this, as leftists generally, is that it's not just an intellectual pursuit. It's not simply a pursuit of knowing things about what's going on. It's also about honing our emotional selves and taking control of ourselves as emotional beings. Because capitalists want to reduce us to feral, greed-seeking, selfish animals. And leftists think that we're more than that. Leftists think that we're more than that. And we can be more than that. And we should be more than that. And the way that we do that is that we stop allowing our emotions to be in charge. We stop allowing our emotions to be in charge. And that we take control of our own emotions. And if you don't acknowledge that your emotions can take over, if you don't acknowledge that you can be taken over by your emotions, then your emotions are going to take you places. And you're going to follow your feelings, you're going to follow your gut, you're going to follow your emotional self, and it's going to lead you into a fucking war that kills 1 million people. Like, it'll do that. And it won't, and if you don't pause and actually think through and contemplate on your emotional self, you can do a lot of damage. You can do a lot of damage. That's why I always recommend the chakras, because the chakras puts you right on the ground and just basically goes like, nope, you're an emotional wreck. Figure out what matters. Figure out where you're at before you even make any decision at all. Who says AI chats can convince idiots of anything? Imam trading up Robot Jesus AI right now. Oddly, he'll tell you all to give me money to get rid of its evil influence on you. What a coincidence that I trained him. I was amazed at how easy war rage was to whip up. People were just so sick about hearing about Saddam on TV, I think. Well, America was a wounded animal. Like, America, up until 9/11, America believed that it was invincible. America still believes that it's invincible. But there hadn't been an event like that on American soil. And Americans, because Americans are the most propagandized people on the planet, they didn't even know that they had enemies. Like Americans genuinely thought that we are spreading our influence throughout the world as benevolent people. We're sending foreign aid into the world. Everybody loves America. Look at how amazing we are. We're here for order and to spread our beauty and the glory of liberal democracy and all of this kind of stuff. And the idea that the rest of the world actually hates the shit out of America is completely foreign. Which is why, like, you have these absolutely telling moments where on the national stage, someone is able to actually ask the President of the United States, why do they hate us? Which, when you think about it, is a very powerful question. It is a very, very powerful question because it acknowledges that people hate us, and it asks the question from a place of genuine desire to understand and a genuine admission of our own ignorance. Why do they hate us? And the President of the United States, the guy with his finger on the nuclear button, looked in her face and said with a straight face, they hate us for our freedoms. And people bought it. And people bought it. People actually heard that response and didn't immediately think, this guy's full of shit. This guy's totally full of shit. No, they heard they hate us for our freedoms, and they all put their hand on their heart, saluted the flag, and sang the national anthem. Like, it's an astounding historical moment. And so America is in this fervor, this absolute frenzy, because they've been hit, and they've been hit in a place that has whipped up their fear. And no one is more dangerous than someone who's afraid. And most people are operating from a position of fear. That most people, when I talk to people on TikTok and when I talk to people in the world, they tell me what their concerns are. They tell me their opinions, and I just see the fear. That everybody is operating from a place of deep, entrenched fear. And that fear became an existential way of are the bombs going to start dropping on us? Are we going to get into this war? And we gotta fight back. And with no understanding whatsoever, that we are the perpetrators of this war. That we're the villains. Obviously we're the villains. Right? We're obviously the villains. It's crazy that to say otherwise. And so the war rage is easy to whip up because people are scared. And voices of reason are not permitted to be listened to in America. That those voices are chased away. Lola. Well, hello, Lola. How you doing? What do you think about JT? Justin Trudeau? I think he's a simp for capital. I think he's basically just a haircut, right? Like, his job is essentially to tilt his head to the side and go, oh, when people complain about the issues that they have. On almost every issue, he basically just reads cue cards on behalf of the capitalist state. Yeah, he's a surrogate for capital. Should we have an election? I mean, I don't think the result will be positive. So an election will happen. I'm not frothing at the mouth for an election. It doesn't matter to me. Like, the liberals and the conservatives are essentially allies. They work together to facilitate the goals of capital within the nation. The liberal brand is basically let's get more female capitalists. Let's get more gay capitalists. But on the issues that really, really matter, like who owns things, who owns stuff, they essentially agree with the conservatives. Was there treason? Probably not. Like, I think the worst thing that the Trudeau administration actually did was evoke the Emergencies Act, but I don't really have a treason? Probably not. Like, I mean, if Justin Trudeau is guilty of treason, then probably every Canadian leader ever is guilty of treason. I don't really understand this comment, Lola, but it's beautifully written, so I'm going to read it anyway. Trudeau, he peats and repeats the narcissist poem. If I did it, I didn't mean it. It's not that bad. If it was, it's your fault. Yeah. Like, I mean, I don't know. I just think that the facade is breaking apart on Trudeau. It's been breaking apart for a while now. He's essentially been leaning fairly heavily on the NDP to prop himself up and to maintain the power structure, the sort of liberal, what could be called left power structure within the capital system, it'll collapse. This election might be the one. Like, Pierre Poilievre is looking good. We'll see. Like, and when I say Pierre Poilievre is looking good, I don't mean Pierre Poilievre is looking good in terms of his leadership or his policies or the ideas that he has. He's just looking good in terms of his positioning and his ability to convince the populace that he'll be a capable leader when he's not interested in that. Like, he's going to be just as bad as Trudeau. Probably worse, frankly. Probably worse. Chrystia Freeland is guilty of treason. What would convince you that Chrystia Freeland is guilty of treason? Like, treason is actually a very specific offense. Like, it's pretty unlikely that Chrystia Freeland would actually be guilty of treason. But and this is, like, I'm no fan of Chrystia Freeland. I think Chrystia Freeland is a total loser. Like, probably amongst one of the most terrifying figures in Canadian politics is Chrystia Freeland. And nobody knows what treason means. Everybody just loves the word. Yeah, Lola, I like your spirit. I like your spunk. You're coming in. That's absolutely the truth. Like, everybody's just like, oh, they did something I don't like. It's treason, I tell you. Like, probably not. Like, Justin Trudeau did not sell state secrets. Like, it's Freeland primary loyalty is to literal Nazis, not to Canadians. I mean, I think that Freeland believes what many neoliberal capitalists believe, which is that the ends justify the means. That you can see a lot of the same ideas. Like, Hillary Clinton thinks the same way. The Clintons generally, Bill Clinton, the Bushes certainly. That Reagan, like all the way back to Reagan, even before Reagan, there's this belief that it is acceptable to fund and train and arm extremist groups and far-right extremist groups in a nation if it leads to the successful overthrow of the impediments to Western capital, which is usually socialists and communists. And it's just underneath Freeland, it's gotten really, really obvious that, like, when we do that in Iraq, for example, nobody cares in the West because it's not a white nation and it's this foreign country with foreign like Islam. Like, who in the West gives a shit or knows anything about Islam? Like, nobody knows anything about it. And so we hear that, like, oh, we're funding Al Qaeda, and everybody's like, okay, well, what is that? Like, we don't have an emotional connection to it, so we might as well be saying, like, we're funding Shu Blah Blah of the Jingada regime, right? Like, it might as well be Star Wars shit, like, literally, like, it's Darth Faridius of the Haglamal species received funding. Like, we don't know what these things are. And so we just default to a position that says, like, well, it must be fine. Like, it must be good because we're doing it, right? But under Freeland, it's gotten really obvious because we are funding Nazis. Like, we're funding Ukrainian Nazis. We've been funding Ukrainian Nazis for years and years now. God, it'll be almost 10 years. Think about that. It'll be almost 10 years we've been funding Ukrainian Nazis. And that does have emotional weight, right? That has, like, an emotional hit. Like, we know what a Nazi is. We've been bombarded with all of this propaganda for our whole lives. And not just propaganda. Like, I have literally watched movies where the hero, the person we've been rooting for, was just walking around shooting Nazis dead. That we were all just like, yeah, kill those Nazis. Friggin' Indiana Jones was just like, Nazis are dead. And I was like a kid watching Indiana Jones just like cap Nazis, whip Nazis, chop Nazis in half. A Nazi grabbed hold of, like, the Ark of the Covenant, and I watched his face melt off and his eyes boil out of his head. And I was like, ha 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 ha, Nazis are worthless. Like, this was how we all grew up, understanding intrinsically that Nazis are evil. That, like, Hitler and Satan were the same. That they had this kind of thing. And now we're being led by a group that's actively funding Nazis, right? That's actively funneling money into Nazi hands. Like, we've got all of these reports, we've got all of this evidence that, and Chrystia Freeland's own grandfather literally worked for Goebbels, like was a Nazi propagandist, was a Banderite, like, so it's obvious now, but it's not actually that much different than what they've all been doing all along. It's just that we don't know anything about, like, Islam, and we don't know anything about East Asian culture, and we don't know anything about this. And so when we get these reports in, we're just like, oh, okay. But now the report sounds like Chrystia Freeland funds Nazis. Oh, yeah. But even then, you know what liberals say? It's fine to fund Nazis because we're throwing them into the meat grinder, right? We'll throw them into the meat grinder against Putin because Putin's the true evil, right? Like, so it's fine to fund Nazis. This strategy has never blown up in anybody's face ever, right? It's never been the case that the far-right groups that we have funded to overthrow and achieve our objectives in other countries have themselves taken power and started to do things that go against our wishes. So funding Nazis is fine, right? Like, it's brutal. It's brutal. Freeland tried to just scribble 3 names onto the terrorist list with no process. She made up a claim that Russia did Q envoy to try to whip up war hysteria, froze accounts without court orders. Yeah. We're at war now because no G7 country, not even Canada, would negotiate Crimea or enforce Minsk Accords. I mean, I would argue that we're at war now just because American capitalists want the land. I think that's simple. And I really do think it is that simple. I think that what we are seeing is we're just, there's this war strategy that America employs, and once you understand this war strategy, it makes the actions of what America's been doing make a little bit more sense, which is that the goal of the American strategy is not necessarily to get land or resources, although stealing resources is definitely part of it, but it's to make sure that these areas cannot be developed. That's the actual goal, right? Like, which country is most likely to develop Ukraine? Well, Russia, right? Pretty obviously, right? Russia is the most likely to develop Ukraine. Which country is the most likely to develop the Middle East and develop Afghanistan, for example? Well, probably China or Russia, right? Probably. And if the Middle East gets developed and actually becomes a stable force in the region, well, is that good for Europe? Is that good for America? In terms of the perspective of what Europe and America has in the world stage? Not really. So the strategy is just blow the places up. Just blow them up. Make it so that they can't develop. Just keep them blown up. Keep them destroyed. Right? Yeah. Then Harper and Kenney started to fund literal Nazi Azov Battalion. Yeah. Freeland tripled down on that. Yeah, there's, like I say, the conservatives and the liberals are allies, right? They work together. You should look up what Michael Ignatieff said about Freeland in his book. It's very telling. I don't really care about Michael Ignatieff, but I mean, it might be worth a look. I don't know that it would change my opinion too much. Like, I already think Freeland is sort of Nazi adjacent. Yeah, Nazis are evil. It's an ideology that requires genocide of its followers. Yeah, it's like literally it built in. Tesco, good to see you, bud. You're the commie god. Am I one of those anti-white communists? I mean, no. I don't really care to, like, there's no such thing as white. Like, I just don't feel the need to acknowledge that this is like, if I start talking about race relations, it is from this position of understanding that European and Western nations invented the concept of whiteness in order to kill people, right? Like that, in order to make sure that the white working class and the black working class would never ally against capital. It's a strategy, and I don't care to be like, we gotta protect whiteness. Like, I don't care about that at all. while at the same time doing honor to the violence that has been perpetuated by the white community uh, against against people of color. Uh, I don't know why I'm getting so much Vosh stuff here, dude. I think Vosh is a loser. I don't really care to discuss anything that this guy thinks. Like, he's an FBI snitch. He's probably got FBI funding and FBI backing. Uh, he's an imperialist, like straight up. He's just a straight up pro imperialist. He doesn't care about evidence, facts, or any of that kind of stuff. Like, if it's good for the American Empire, then Vosh is all about it. So I don't really care about Vosh's opinion on. I don't really care about Vosh's opinion about white or not or any of that kind of stuff. Like, doesn't matter to me. What I do care about. How do I know he's an FBI? I didn't say he was an FBI agent. I said he was an FBI snitch because he confessed to it on his channel. Like, he confessed to it. He said so. That's how I know. That during the Occupy movement, he was an FBI snitch. That he was going to the FBI and snitching on Occupy people. He said so. So he's 100% an asset. Like, and I don't know why we would pretend otherwise. Like, he said so. He's like so obviously a creepy loser, and yet has one of like the big YouTube followings. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, he doesn't, and his positions are so like dumb. Like, I'm more or less of the opinion that Vosh exists as a way to funnel people against real revolutionary work. Right? Like, if you are becoming red pilled, right? If you're becoming red pilled, if you're starting to see that things are fraying, if you're becoming anti-capitalist, well, a strategy that the powerful use is controlled dissent. And controlled dissent looks like Vosh. Let's get somebody who's like a Bernie bro, somebody who's like a social democrat, who is like, man, I understand what you're saying about capitalism. We definitely need to slightly reform the system. Let's slightly reform the system together, but make sure that the powerful keep the means of production, right? And it's Vosh's celebration of illiteracy and ignorance. He's like one of the quote unquote debate bros, but he's really terrible at it. Like, he doesn't really know how to debate or how to have a conversation. I don't know why people watch him. That's the one that really gets me the most about Vosh. I don't really understand what people get from watching him. That he doesn't know anything. It's often very disgraceful, the way that he acts and the way that he talks. He doesn't really seem to have like a moral core or a moral principle that really matters. I don't think he's smart at all. And I think he's essentially like a pro-imperialist simp. That as we all get older, we're going to look at a guy like Vosh and realize how big a fucking loser this guy was. Right? That, like, he's a massive loser who essentially just licks the boots of capital as much as he possibly can. But yeah, he thinks that there should be universal health care, and like, so he's got like, reasonable democratic positions. So he essentially exists to funnel as much energy as possible back into the Democratic Party, which is exactly the role of somebody who is going forward with controlled dissent, right? To just funnel as much energy as you possibly can into a dead, calcified system that's betraying the populace. And that's his job, and he does it very well. Vosh's take on the Donbass war is basically take the Russian side and just say that everything that the Russians say happened because Russia did all of that. Yeah, it's just brain dead, right? Like, it's just brain dead. Like, he doesn't actually know anything. Yeah, he basically would argue that the Euromaidan snipers were Russian. Yeah. Vosh constantly punches left. He hated the Bernie movement. Yeah, his base are 15-year-old former, quote-unquote, former alt-righters. Yeah. Why do you think they switched to leftist? I think that the number one thing that pushes people to the left is seeing what the right actually represents. That eventually it just becomes untenable to, because like the right wing essentially, especially in America, has like lost its mind entirely. Like you're looking at essentially a trans genocide right now, an assault against the queer community for sure. But then just the history of racism and colonialism that exists in the country. And essentially being a right-winger basically means doing what Ben Shapiro does, which is just shrug and say, sounds like a you problem. So if you're not a psychopath, right, then you kind of go, well, I don't think so. Like, I think that sounds wrong. And so it starts to push people a little bit more to the left. And so you get people like Vosh in position to capture you, to be like, yeah, you're right. The history of colonialism definitely exists, but that's over now, right? Oh my God, Tesco, come on, man. Like, come on, man. Like, are we actually gonna have this conversation? Do you actually think this is a good thing to do? Do you actually think this is a smart idea? I'm gonna play a song first. I'm gonna play this song before we get into this conversation, because I have found that I need to play this song in order to get myself in the emotional space for this. I was just a little boy when my mom and dad divorced. Through my tantrums, cried my tears, I'd keep their vows by force. Now that I'm an older man, I see it had to be this way. My love for them, it keeps on growing each and every day. Time passed me by so swiftly, I could have been a better man. And every day I'm trying to do the best things that I can. And though they're not the people I expected they would be, well, I love them all the same. I just want them to be free. 10 years, me and my wife, we traveled round the globe. Sacred vows and shared regrets, they filled our lives with hope. Then one day she tells me that a man is not for her. Those 10 years are a memory now, but my love for her still stirs. Time passed me by so swiftly, I could have been a better man. And every day I'm trying to do the best things that I can. And though she's not the person I expected she would be, well, I love her all the same. I just want her to be free. My love had a little girl, a scrappy tomboy type. I watched her blossom like a flower, but she felt not quite right. Then one day she tells me she's a young man, not a girl. I picked her up and held her close and sent my son into the world. And time passed me by so swiftly, I could have been a better man. And every day I'm trying to do the best things that I can. And though he's not the person I expected he would be. Well, I love him all the same. I just want him to be free. And though they're not the people I expected they would be, well, I love them all the same. I just want them to be free. Well, thank you, Lola. I appreciate that. Thank you, Lola. I appreciate that. That's very kind of you to say. I feel like one of the things I've learned is that if you want to get into the trans conversation with me, I gotta start with that song. I don't want to end with that song. I want to start with that song. Because I feel as though when we get into the trans conversation, it's essentially emotionally driven. Did I write it? Yes, I did. That's my song. It's a John Sanderson original. Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate that. That what we are looking at with the trans conversation and with what's going on in the trans community is coming from a place of deep, deep emotion. And that we are deeply emotional about it. And we're in a position right now where we're deeply mistrustful of one another. We're deeply mistrustful of our institutions. We're deeply mistrustful of what's going on in our communities and in our towns and in our cities. And so when we hear about the existence of a trans person, a good amount of us are immediately going to the dystopian, worst case possible storyline that exists in our imagination. And just like the abortion conversation, the hard truth about it is that the conversation exists between the parents, the children, and the doctors, and no one else. That the state does not understand what is happening, that people who are outside of the conversation likely do not understand what's happening, and that if there is an internal critique or if there is a critique to be made, it is highly likely that the best people and the people who understand what's going on and understand how to reform the decision making that exists around it are the doctors, the parents, and the children. That certainly mistakes will happen. Certainly things will go wrong. How do I know? Because there are human beings involved in the process. Certainly that will be the case. But stepping in, demonizing these people, legislating against them, creating rules, interfering, getting in the way, causing all kinds of problems based exclusively on your fear is only going to make the problem worse, is only going to make the situation worse. And at the end of the day, just like with the abortion conversation, the only people who should be getting involved in the conversation in any meaningful way are the doctors, the parents, and the children. And that's it. Why are we so concerned with what other people want? I think that there's a couple of elements going on, but the one that I like to talk about the most is that you do have people like Matt Walsh, who is a theocratic fascist. It's not hyperbolic to say, it's on his Twitter feed. So theocratic fascist Matt Walsh wants people to suffer. How do I know? Because he's a fascist. And so you have people like theocratic fascist Matt Walsh who gathers a group of people around him in order to maximize suffering against minority groups because it gets him off. Tesco. Well, like, if trans, it's linked to suicide, depression, narcissistic personality disorder. Why aren't they wanting to have it not shown to children so that only the real trans will naturally come out? So this exact same argument was used against the gay community. That well, we shouldn't show gay people to children because then they'll become gay. There is literally no evidence to show that a child will just decide to be trans, that a person just decides to be trans. That quite the opposite. Quite the opposite. And what it is it's a fear. It's a fear that comes out of straight white people, straight white men especially, of having to deal with something much more complex. Trans is a bit different. Yeah, and there are differences, that's fair to say. Yeah, transness is not a social contagion. And Tesco, I want you to just be really aware. I'm gonna give you a real heads up. There are trans people in the chat right now. I have managed to, for whatever reason, attract a fairly healthy trans segment of the population to myself, and they are not going to be as nice to you as I am going to be. I'm just going to be as upfront about that as I possibly can. Trans is a bit different. There are important differences. To me, the biggest difference is that it, like, the gay community, I think that issue was able to be settled in many places. I grew up in a pretty right-wing Christian environment, and the gay issue got settled mainly because finally people were able to ask themselves, am I gay? That enough of the hysteria died down, enough of the society had kind of calmed down on the issue, the conversation had really happened on many cultural levels. People within the community were starting to come out as gay, and it gave enough safety to straight white men, let's be really honest about who these people are, about who's holding it back, so that they could look in the mirror and genuinely ask themselves, well, am I gay? The hardest thing for a person to do, is to deal with themselves. There is no greater act. There is nothing more difficult. We work very hard to not deal with ourselves. And so, whites are the only race that is pro-gay. Well, I mean, I'm just talking about from what's happening within our society. And that's a pretty blanket statement unto itself, but I understand. And they ask themselves, am I gay? And they came out and said, no, I'm not. Or maybe, yes, I am. And then the conversation, of course, of, well, if you're gay, does that mean you're going to hit on me? No, you're not? Okay, fine. But what trans does is it forces a different question. Because it is fundamentally having a person ask themselves, am I a man? What is a man? That Matt Walsh, because he's a fascist and a coward, asks the inverse of this. He says, what is a woman? Because he's too cowardly to actually ask, what is a man? Because if he were to ask what is a man, then he might actually accidentally ask himself that question. And he might actually ask a question of his own masculinity and what his own masculinity actually is. Does it even exist? Yes, I think lots of people have questions about trans people. I think lots of people have questions. And I'm not necessarily the person to give the answer. I consider myself an ally. I work with and know many trans people. For whatever reason, the universe has decided that I'll just have trans people around me. It just seems to be what's happened in my life. But my suggestion is to seek trans people out and to ask them, because they know. Like, one of the reasons why I stopped listening to Joe Rogan and I stopped paying attention to Joe Rogan is because Joe Rogan's whole thing is like, oh, it's completely fine to platform transphobes and Nazis and fascists because good speech beats bad speech. And if you don't hear the bad speech, then you can't hear the good speech. It's like, okay, cool. Good, interesting idea, Rogan. So you're platforming all of these transphobes and literal Nazis. Are you going to platform a trans rights activist? No trans rights activist, Joe? Where's the trans rights activist, Joe? And he keeps having these trans conversations with just like random comedians and like just well-meaning people, but who don't know anything. And he's got the resources and the ability to get anybody he wants on that show. But he just doesn't platform them. He just refuses to. So I just stopped listening because he's obviously a hypocrite. And a transphobe, obviously. Lola, I was just wondering why there are so many nowadays. Is it because they're free to speak? Or is it generally parenting skills of these kids? Or DNA changes? Lola, I think your first inclination is the correct one. That it's not that there are more than there used to be. It's that if you go back 40 years, like, there isn't like a long history of being nice to trans people, right? Like, we beat the shit out of those people. That if a boy put on a girl's dress or if a girl dressed like a boy, we beat the shit out of them. And it really is as simple as that. And it's easier for a trans person to hide. And many of them did. And then you also have the period of time where if a person were to come out as trans, well, we would treat them as if they were mentally ill. That it was a mental illness. And this, because of the gay community and because the gay community was able to crack open the discourse in a more serious way, that it has allowed the culture to soften ever so slightly and has allowed trans people to sort of slide through the door. And my opinion of trans people generally is like interesting phenomenon. Why should anyone care? Like, it doesn't matter to you. It doesn't affect your life even a little bit. No one would ever decide to do this. Like, no one would ever just make the choice to one day do this. Like, what you are describing puts you in a position of sounding like a madman. That there's obviously something much deeper going on. And it's difficult. It's difficult to get our hands on because reality is difficult to get your hands on. That you have to accept that there is a physical aspect to human sexuality, but there is also an underlying more ephemeral aspect to it. And I think, Tesco, you are right. The main part that is concerning is the children part. From the outside, I can see some... Tesco, I'm going to full stop you right there, bud. I'm going to just put a full stop right on you. Hard no. Like, hard no. Trying to sound nice when I say it, bud, but I want you to know that if you're saying out loud two people. Well, from an outside view, I can see some social benefits for being trans to some extent. Full stop. Hard pass. No, thank you. That the people who I see who are existing in the world as trans are doing so because they want to be true to themselves, because they want to live in this reality being true to themselves. And for many of them, if the choice is to live in this reality as a false created aspect and iteration of themselves, many of them are choosing not to do it. That they want to live as themselves in the world. And that we are experiencing sort of a first articulation and a first iteration of it, to which I'm sure there will be a certain degree of negotiation and a certain degree of back and forth, and hopefully a settling in. Hopefully a settling in where people begin to simply just understand, and where the community doesn't feel like it needs to express itself with such vigor. That's the other part of it. I think that there is this, and it comes from a place of fear, and the trans people have every reason to be afraid of this society, as it allows theocratic fascists, Nazis, and losers to be platformed openly against them. They have every reason to want to be as vocal as they possibly can be. But the idea that, like, there's some kind of odd conspiracy going on amongst the weakest people in the society, it's just sort of an oddball position to take. That, yes, there are children involved in the process of discovering human sexuality, but the people who know most and know best about what's going on with that are likely the parents, the doctors, and the children themselves. Yeah, there's nothing easy about existing as a trans person. Sahelanthropus Chad says, love your beard. Well, thank you. Strong first comment. Appreciate it. For a man to want his dick cut off is very, very hard to imagine for anyone who is not absolutely trans. Yeah. Like, you would not, quote unquote, go trans just to get guys if you were gay. Yeah. Contant says, let me make this known. Some trans allies to know to slice the pie. We know how to clear the hallways. We know how to front sight, slack pause, and squeeze. Sorry, man. That's always like, that feels very confusing what you just said there. Sorry. I don't really understand the comment. Okay, maybe I understand the comment a little bit more, Cotton, although I don't think I'll be reading it. Yeah, I'm coming to a place with this conversation where I'm trying to be a lot more understanding, but we all do need to acknowledge that there are bad faith actors in this conversation that are spreading terror. And I find that people often come in here and will have conversations with me about trans people and about the trans community. And some of them I think are actually genuine, but I do think that there is a concession and an understanding that needs to be made that the trans community is being terrorized, and that trans people have been terrorized, and that doesn't often get included in the conversation. That for centuries we have killed, maimed, destroyed trans people. We've done everything we can to make sure that this place is not safe for them. And it looks as though a large segment of the populace is attempting to make that the case again. That the legislations that are being pushed through and passed throughout the United States are real. That you would never accept any of the legislation that was being put forward if it was happening to a straight person. You would never accept any of it. If somebody showed up and tried to implement a dress code on a public social level, you would call that person a fascist and a Nazi, very obviously. But if it's done to a trans person, then it's fine. If a legislator said, I need to look at your children's genitals, you would absolutely think that they were a pedophile. But if it's to trans people, then it's fine. I don't understand the question, Tesco. Are any not directed to children, though? Like, and there really does come a point, and I find that there is a barrier in the conversation as well. Like, do you think like a 3-year-old is having their dick removed? Like, is that really what you think happens? Because like that's not what's going on. Like this is a long, lengthy conversation that happens between all of the actors involved. This is a process. It's not like parents are whisking 3-year-old children into a room and there's like a Charlie Brown cloud that shows up with like scissors and all of this, and then they whisk the child out of the room having removed their genitalia or something. Like that's not what happens. This is a long process that begins where it begins and ends where it ends. And what's going on right now is that you have bad faith actors pretending as though something else is going on and lying about it. And then everybody looks at it and goes, oh, I believe the liar when he lies. And then I get to talk to people who are absolutely convinced that the lie is true. As in, like I saw for stopping genetical changing surgery for underage children, are there any bills not for children, though? Oh, sure. I see what you're saying. Like, and please, like, what you seem concerned with, Tesco, is child abuse, right? Like that's what you seem concerned with, that parents are abusing their children. Like, would that be incorrect to say? And you want to know whether or not, and so if what you are saying is that if there is legislation that's put forth that prevents what you perceive to be child abuse, then you would be in favor of this. But have there been laws that have been put forward that affect adults? And the answer to that is yes, of course. Like, of course there's been laws that are being passed. Texas passed literally passed a dress code. Like, but it is worth pointing out that, like, this narrative, yeah, this narrative that you are putting out there, this child abuse narrative, it's first of all extraordinarily inflammatory, but also very generalized. Like, I'm absolutely positive that at some point, someone, somewhere that you could find abused a child in the way that you're describing. I'm absolutely positive of it. Why? Because there are humans. We're human beings. But to pretend as though that this is a generalized problem, and then to also pretend as though that this is a generalized problem that is worth taking up all of our legislative power in order to solve, is creepy and weird. Like, there are literally homeless people sleeping on the streets. There are literally people without houses. There's a general sense of poverty in the society. There is hardship and homelessness spreading throughout America, and our legislatures are being clogged with Christian fascists who are literally saying things like our opponents are possessed by demons and stuff. And who are actually saying out loud that we're doing this for the glory of Jesus Christ. Like, this is literally what's going on. And so it makes it very difficult for me to believe that all of this concern is coming from a genuine place. That what I think is actually happening is that people are afraid these right-wing Christian fascists are psychos, and they want to destroy them. And so they're going to. And it's also beneficial for the system of capital, because it means that we're not talking about the homelessness the capital is generating. You've seen studies that trans suicide rate is 50% correlated to depression. I mean, I imagine that the trans suicide rate is 50% because people are actively seeking to kill trans people. Right? Like, are you actually trying to tell me that, like, being trans is bad because people commit suicide? Like, I would say that people commit suicide because their environment is trying to kill them. Yeah, Christofascism. That's why I still vote, because y'all would literally genocide my friends. Yep. Like, this is what's kind of astounding about the conversation, is how much energy is being put forth into something that is, like, this affects a very small section of the populace. Just pretty. Yeah, imagine being trans and not having depression in this fascistic climate. That would be hard ass. Yeah. I imagine that. I suspect that people who are trans do have suicidal inclination and do have depression. And I don't know, for the system of capital to be pointing a finger and saying that somebody has narcissistic personality disorder, that's pretty funny. Like, the most narcissistic possible people in the world pointing at somebody else saying that they're narcissistic is pretty amusing, frankly. Like, why are we spending so much time talking about trans people and not the homeless people who are on the streets? Why do we care this much about this issue? Why do we care this much about this issue? And the answer that I can come up with is because it lets us not talk about the system of capital. That if we clog our legislatures up with this, then we don't need to actually deal with the wealth inequality. We don't need to actually deal with the failures of capital. That this is a classic far-right neo-Nazi tactic to take small minority groups who are defenseless and helpless and demonizing them to have us all hyper-focus on this, instead of actually saying, hey, maybe we should seize the means of production and get rid of the capitalist class. And what's unfortunate is that I think it is working. That the energy of the left is being taken up. The energy of the left is being taken up by protecting people who need to be protected from far-right fascists like Matt Walsh. And it is worth pointing out that, like, this is exactly the path that the Nazis took. Like, pretty much verbatim, like step by step. That it begins with the trans community and then it moves into the gay community. It's worth pointing that out. or the Chinese, or the weather balloons, or the vacations, yeah? All distractions from the system of capital. Yep. Well, we've reached the end of this one. I hope for anybody out there who's having concerns about their trans brothers and sisters, I hope that you'll get to a point where you can realize that the reason why you're putting so much energy into it is because you're worried about yourself. That the existence of a trans person raises extremely difficult questions about how you perceive yourself. And that what you're doing is projecting that energy outwards instead of focusing it inwards and asking yourself the more important questions. What is a man? What is a woman? What does it mean to be a man or a woman? What does it mean to be a person? What does it mean to be alive? Ask yourself these questions and leave these trans people alone. Always remember, each and every one of you is a quantum being walking around in quantum energy. The billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes you'll never realize it. You'll just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Revolt. Rebel. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.